Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of your favorite NFL podcast, Sweeping the Nation. At least we hope we made some kind of traction in checks the title in the top corner. 92 episodes of this show. What a time it's been. We are creeping ever so closer to 100. If only everything were right in 100 would be the Super Bowl episode, but it's going to be just after that, which kind of works in the label of the show. Welcome back to the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Your favorite troublesome triumvirate trio is here to recap what was a wild card weekend. Not a lot of wild games in there, technically speaking. A couple wild results, though. We'll definitely get to that later on in the episode on the show that is headlined by fun, football, and chaos. Before we get to all of that, let's introduce the panel as always. On the top of the screen with me, our games master himself, the man who we already know what his goal is for 2024, to finish the story. And just like with other types of stories that need to be finished, we'll have to wait nearly a year in the making for it. Our guy, Justin, how are we doing, brother?
A little better this week. A little less disappointed in myself, but that's what it is.
Time heals all wounds. Time heals all wounds, my friend. Speaking of time, how deep in the closet did you have to get that a beautiful, beautiful sweater, Rick? It is absolutely glorious, but was it deep in the closet? Was that the forefront? You got to let us know. The Podfather is at the bottom of the screen with some Anaheim Mighty Ducks gear on. I need to know because I think this is the first time I've seen it.
Yeah, well, so I've had this since October. This was a birthday gift from the wife. Actually, it's a 47 brand. It's one of those vintage throwback hoodies. So it wasn't that far back in the closet, but I mean, I needed the day to bring it out. And honestly, to be fair, with the weather we've been having this week, it was cold enough to kind of make it make sense. So, actually, it's kind of nice and roomy. I enjoy it. I have another one that I'll wear a little later down the line for you. So, but a different team, not a Ducks, but a different team. And points if you can guess which team, but you never guess which team.
No, probably not. But no, that's good. I have a very similar one, actually. It's an original 6 one where it has each of the retro logos and the 6 there. I don't know if I have it up here with me in CT or if it might be back down in New York. I have to figure that out. But
I'll give a shout out too, because like I said, going into this year, I have some fresh new threads. 47 brand, obviously, for all this. And there's a company called Home Field that does a lot of college attire, but it's interesting, different college attire. So I'll wear some throwback stuff when I'm doing that too. So plug them, go check them out, and let's talk some football, boys.
Yes, glorious. Maybe our first ever sponsor one day if we get lucky enough. Send this clip to them, people. But with that being said, the introductions are out the way. The unofficial sponsor that is not a sponsor is out the way. Let's get to the meat of the matter, boys. As the people could tell by the title, we will be talking about something that a team out of the playoffs did that we were actually impressed that they did. The Las Vegas Raiders made a proper decision here, ladies and gentlemen. I know we're just shocked and awe. We said we would try to leave the coaching alone, but because the Raiders made such a intriguing decision, really turned about a form from what they normally do, we're going to talk about on the show here today. Before we get to the playoff action, which is recapping the wild card round, the headlines of that, and then going to the divisional round in what is we're slowly approaching the end of this NFL season, and it's hopefully getting good. But before we get to the football and the chaos, let's have some fun. Rick, you're starting us off this week. What's the mind-blowing fact for the people?
Cast your minds back, gentlemen, to the year 1940 when Hanna-Barbera released a cartoon involving 2 characters who would become the backbones of their library of cartoons for years to come. And actually, a cartoon that you know of very, very well. But a cartoon that was known by a different name, or at least the main characters were known by a different name at the time. The main characters of this cartoon were named Jasper and Jinx. And the story goes that this cartoon from Jasper and Jinx was so popular and so successful that Hanna and Barbera got together and said, we should really change the name of these characters to something a little more affable, a little more friendly, if you will. So what they did was they created a contest amongst their company, amongst their crew. Come up with the names of these new characters and you'll win a prize. Well, animator John Carr suggested 2 names based upon a popular Christmas time mixed drink. And he won the contest and he got a nice, cool $50 with it, which I think was still adorned with Ulysses Grant at the time. But, 1940, who knows what was on the bill. The drink in question actually has been around since the 1820s. Goes back to England, and it was something that was Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's. More of an upper Midwest style drink. Gentlemen, this story is the origin story for Tom and Jerry. Not Jasper and Jinx as they were known in 1940, but Tom the cat and Jerry the mouse. How about that?
That's awesome.
The drink, by the way, is awful. I looked at the ingredients. Don't do it.
So no first expressions on that coming in.
Well, here's the deal. So basically, you have to take water, milk, nutmeg, cloves, allspice, and then you have to make your own Tom and Jerry batter, which is egg yolks and egg whites separated with cream of tartar, and then sugar, vanilla extract, and Jamaican dark rum. Now, what's the problem with this? Well,
everything.
Well, yeah,
like an hour to make
that, and also if basically you refrigerate this mixture, so you mix the yolks, you mix the egg whites, but you didn't cook anything, so this mixture is still kind of raw. So you could get some kind of illness from that. So I wouldn't go about drinking it if I were you. But in the 1940s, apparently it was popular to drink that. So who knows?
Well, the 1940s was a different time. I'm sure you guys have seen it where it's like the old medicine labels and it says on the back of it like what the hell was in medicine back in the old days. Like basically half of the stuff that would kill you nowadays was like, this will make you feel better after a cold. Like what were we doing as a society?
Listen, they treated toothaches with whiskey, which we still do nowadays, but for different reasons. So
It's something like seeing some of that stuff kind of makes me wonder: have we've progressed in theory, but have we also regressed in a couple of ways?
We absolutely have. We absolutely have regressed for sure. For sure.
Like, God, I would like. I mean, it's obviously expired and wouldn't be able to happen. But like, what would taking medicine from back in the day do to us now? Like that might. That might
be an opioid addiction.
Well, I also believe too that you have those compounding pharmacies that are out there that are different from like the CVS and the Walgreens, where they actually still make the drugs on site because there are people that have allergies to certain ingredients that you have, and like let's say you're allergic to the like one of the key ingredients in Robitussin or whatever. They can make you a cough syrup that's like Robitussin but without that ingredient. That way you can still take it, get the same effect, but not the allergic reaction to it. So I'm sure those are still around somewhere. I don't know what back alley they're in, but they're probably around somewhere.
Yeah,
sure, you're in Connecticut. Go find one. I'm sure there are plenty in Bristol.
You know what? It would not surprise me in any way. If we're being fully honest here. So, Rick, absolutely outstanding, mind-blowing fact right there from Jasper and Jinx to Tom and Jerry, and the animation as well, because you mentioned like 1940s, like because the things it would constantly rerun for all of our childhoods. The three of us are relatively close in age, but like even people who are 16 now or people that are in their like 40s and 50s, like all the different types of animations, because it'd be very stark contrast to see what the animation changes from what was it originally, those early 1940s versions, to like cleaning up in the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s. It's very like to an extent jarring if you see them so close to one another, but it just goes to show that show forever a classic.
This is just me too, but I think I appreciate the older cartoons more because they're hand drawn.
Yeah.
The storyboards that you saw with if you went back and looked at The Lion King and the documentary on how they made that, the storyboard art was just incredible. And nowadays it's all computer animated and generated. And it's not as realistic, or it's not as like you can feel the time that was put into like the hand drawn cartoons versus the ones that were made on Photoshop or whatever.
And also the thing with that is like with CGI, it's like there's good CGI, and I think we've all seen good CGI, and there's bad CGI where it's just a mess on the screen, where it's like, what are we doing here? Like this is not a film podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Maybe that'll be an offshoot one day, the review critics of chaos. But like they maybe, but just. Some of the CGI in movies nowadays is so bad that kind of makes me worried with like all these different types of movies. This is going to be an off-season episode, I promise you. When the news gets slow, it could be any combination of us that talk about it. Heck, even all three of us. But like you guys have seen some of like the stuff that they either want to remake or turn into live action series, and it's like, how are you going to make this happen? And then you think CGI, and then you're like, oh no, this is going to look bad.
When we do that offshoot, I'm going to get my black turtleneck out of the closet, and I'll just like wear that like a film critic, like this.
Now that I'm excited for.
Oh yeah, I'll look like Anton Ego from Ratatouille.
the Rick Black turtleneck episode is a future one, to say the least. But Rick, outstanding fact once again. Thank you so much. From a fact to some games, Justin, what do you got for us this week?
Okay, so who is the most disappointing wild card weekend performance? Is it Philadelphia or Dallas?
Ooh, this feels like a would you rather, right?
Yeah.
All right. Good.
So this is an interesting question because on one hand, one team just completely dropped the ball. Host.
They both kind of. I mean, it
Yeah.
was never really. They led the whole way in Tampa.
Well, no. The point I'm trying to make though is that one team went in with all that hype of being the number 2 seed, and they finally got over the hump, and then they just dropped the ball on the first drive. On the other hand, you had a team that was more disappointing going into that game, and it just continued to be a disappointment, I think. So I think for me, I think the worst one was Dallas. I think they were the more disappointing one because you knew it was, in both cases, you knew it was over, but with Philadelphia, you knew it was over before they even stepped on the field. With Dallas, you knew it was over on the first drive because the minute that Green Bay sliced up that Cowboys defense, that vaunted Cowboys D with Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence and Deron Bland and all of their big names and all of their hype, you knew it was over. And then it just cavalcaded from there into more chaos and more question marks about this Cowboys brass and this Cowboys team. Incidentally, I don't know if you guys saw this, but have you seen the latest comments on Twitter and Facebook regarding Dak Prescott by CeeDee Lamb's mother?
Oh, no.
That essentially she said that Dak is not him, that Dak is not in it to win it. He's only in it for himself and the money, and CeeDee needs to be traded to another team because he will never win a Super Bowl with the Cowboys as long as Prescott is the quarterback. So, and I mean, you know what? She's not wrong. She's not wrong about that. Listen, the Cowboys wasted one of CeeDee Lamb's best seasons, And yes, Dak Prescott had a great regular season, but it proves that point that the regular season means nothing if you can't win in the playoffs. And they literally made Jordan Love into every other great Green Bay quarterback you've ever seen. And the stat we talked about last week about Aaron Jones slicing up the Cowboys defense, what did he do? He had his way at Jerry's World. It was so disappointing because you expected more from Dallas to come out and defend their home turf and get all that excitement. I understand if you want to say, but that's what we expect from Dallas, and I agree with you. But at the same time, you were the number 2 seed. You were the potential champion to take on San Francisco, and instead you're the first team ever in NFL playoff history to lose to a 7 seed. And the only reason the score was that close was because of garbage time. Let's be honest here. It probably should have ended at 48-17 or whatever it was, because that's basically what it ended up being.
Yeah, despite the fact that the score finished a 16 difference, it was much worse than that. And people would, and on a regular day, losing by 16 is not good, but it was worse than that. I kind of wish that Rick was saying Philly here, because then I understand there is disappointment in both, and we will get to both of these jamokes in that division as a whole later on. Trust me, ladies and gentlemen, we have some things to say. But with Philly, even though I myself personally on the pod, I think I was the only one that picked Philly, I felt that there are instances where talent can get you out of the bad streak that they were in. But Philly was on a rough streak going into things. Now, had I known Brown was not playing in that game beforehand, I would not have picked them. But regardless, you would like to believe that talent can get you out of a funk. When you're riding high and the talent disappoints you, like what's worse? You're in a bad streak and you expect the talent to get out of it and they don't, or you're riding high and the talent disappoints you. I think it's pretty obvious, like Rick said. And Philly, you could say the defending NFC champions, they were talking big and tough at the start of the year. What they start was it 10-1, 11-1, whatever it was, and then they finished
lost to the Jets, which should have been the harbinger right there for a bad season to come.
And with a lot of the wins, they just never, we can still say this. How did a team finish a full 17-game regular season and plus a playoff game, and not once did they play a full 60-minute game? Not once. Yeah. I mean, it's to an extent, the fact they won 11 times is impressive, but it's also what the heck were you doing throughout the majority of these games? They never played a full 60-minute game from start to end. Even the games that they won, how many of them were we ooh, that's a lot closer than it should be? Even the 2 Commanders games, I know we said it in both going into both of those pick challenges that week. But yes, the Commanders play them close. At some point, that can't be the case when you're just that much of the better team. And like, I guess we'll have plenty of time to take on Philly later, because I have to agree with Rick here. I have to say it was Dallas. You were the second seed. It is Jerry's world. It is the guy who said he wouldn't throw 10 interceptions this season, which, I mean, he stayed true in the regular season, not so much in the postseason when you include that. He was an MVP conversation for however long at the end of the season. I wonder how many MVP votes he's actually going to get. I wonder if he's going to be one of the 3 finalists. He is. But like, there's that. There is, you are the second seed. You are guaranteed 2 home playoff games in this playoff cycle. And if you maybe get lucky and San Francisco loses, maybe you get the road to the Super Bowl has to go through Dallas. That is the kind of thing that they have been playing for. And for all the talk that the Dallas fans did about Philly's collapse, man, you guys somehow choked worse, because at least Philly lost to a division winner. Now, yes, we've made fun of that division the entire year, but just stick with me for a moment. At least Philly lost to a division winner. You lost to the team that literally nothing to lose. The team that entered into this year, we were talking about the start of this season, the potential of at the end of this year, the way it is now. Let's go to the alternate reality. The alternate reality of this season is that Jordan Love is basically ousted from the NFL, and Packers fans helped get him to the airport. Matt LaFleur is fired on the spot, and he would have gone winless in December, which
I tried. I really tried to get him fired. He's still sticking around.
And well, we're better at NFC South coaches on this pod, Rick.
Yeah,
and then Brian Gutekunst would have been ousted as well, finally, for all the decisions he made back when Rodgers was still there. Like, that's the alternate reality. Instead, the reality we're living in is, like you said, Rick, now Jordan Love looks to be the 3rd straight quarterback that the Green Bay Packers have drafted. Well, Favre was traded, but you understand what I'm saying. The 3rd straight quarterback that Green Bay brings in and is going to end up being an all-pro player, which, I had a fun fact or fiction going into this week just for the hell of it. Will Jordan Love be the Jets quarterback in 15 years? Fact or fiction is, I think, the next thing for us to ask about in his career. But, like, Dallas messed it up. Dallas messed it up for everyone. Like, this was the year. I'm not saying to go to the Super Bowl, but this was the year to finally beat some of those allegations. And Mike McCarthy helped the Packers win a playoff game as a head coach. The problem was, he's not on the Packers.
It's true. It's very true.
It in this case, it's Dallas. When you consider that, I know so many people are going to try to argue it's Philly. I can see in certain instances, but this is why we play the games. We've said this so many times on the show. This is why we play the games. If we're going from expectations at the start of the year, Philly's the more disappointment. But if we're talking about now going into the playoffs, it's Dallas.
And I do love that, even though it took a full regular season, that my preseason talk about the Cowboys and the Carr and Prescott and Schottenheimer and McCarthy, the car fell off the cliff, boys.
Yep.
Listen, it took us 18 games to get there, but we finally got there. So, chop one up for me.
Rick, it's like clockwork. I was talking about this with one of my close friends yesterday, like a decade plus ago, when, Justin and I were both in high school, when Rick was earning his undergrad degree. Stephen A. would say, you got to give it time. You don't know exactly when it'll happen, but the Dallas Cowboys will disappoint you every single time. And at first, it's a meme. First time, okay, it happened. Second time, okay, maybe it's a coincidence. Third time, it's a trend. And every single year after that, it's like, oh, dear Lord in heaven, what is happening here?
Like the other thing, too, that you're talking about, too. Remember that Jimmy Johnson halftime ceremony that they had?
Yes.
So look at the guys that were around Jimmy Johnson in that halftime ceremony. Can you name me one guy that was a modern Dallas Cowboys player that was there? Like Michael Irvin, Emmitt Smith, Roger Staubach, Troy Aikman, all great Dallas players in their own right mind. But after 1996 or after 2002, who's there? Are you telling me Des Bryant? Like, is that the guy? I feel like this is kind of like the Ed Crane pool, right? If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. Who's your forever guy if you're a Cowboys fan circa 2003? It's Des Bryant, I guess. Tony Romo?
That's
Is it Jose Cortez? I don't know. like who's your forever guy if you're a Cowboys fan nowadays? It sure as hell ain't Prescott.
I told my friend this yesterday. The last time the Cowboys made an NFC Championship game, I was not born.
Yeah.
We have legitimate. You could take this one of two ways. There are people that since the last time they made the NFC Championship game that have grown up, got several degrees, and are either are at their career that they wanted or on their way to it. And then there are people who were teenagers or even young children in elementary, middle school that have grown up, gotten their degrees, and have families. There are people that have kids that have had, and their kids are probably, depending on how old you were back then, maybe your kids are almost at the age you were the last time. Like, this is, at this point, multi-generational, because I don't know how long technically a generation is supposed to span year-wise. Like, I'm willing to say it's at least 2 generations worth of Cowboys fans that have grown up, and this team cannot make it to the NFC title game. They might win you a game at most. And even then, that's a challenge. When everything was supposed to go in your way, the Eagles were completely on the downturn. You beat the Lions in this regular season to prove it. You need to just hope to get lucky if San Fran could lose. You needed if you did your thing, you needed one thing to break right if you're the Dallas Cowboys in this postseason. And you could have been actually the ones finally earning the right to say you're America's team. But they didn't do it again. And now you're not even Texas's team. Because there's another quarterback in Texas that's a whole hell of a lot better than your quarterback. I'll say that much. So it's going to be something to say at the very least. So we have this is just the appetizer to what we'll do when we talk about the NFC East later on, because there's still more for us to rip into that division as a whole, not just these two smokes. But Justin, thank you for the Would You Rather. Very good one to say at the very least. If it wasn't for certain isn't fancy, but what's what?
Ducks, man.
Okay, all right, that's fair. Anyways, moving on for that. Before we get to the playoff talk, we need to make note of what happened. That would have been the perfect transition, Justin, if this news hadn't broken, so we can blame the Vegas Raiders for that. But we do need to talk about this because the Las Vegas
screwed something out.
That's right.
Yeah, even when they get it right, they sort of get it wrong in other instances for podcast continuity. No, but in all seriousness, the Las Vegas Raiders do something that we on the show were saying. I think plenty of NFL media pundits were saying, podcasters and the like. And we're actually still kind of shocked that they did it. The Las Vegas Raiders have made it official within the last 24 hours that Antonio Pierce, the interim tag, is being taken off, but he's not being taken off as the head coach. He's staying, boys. He is going to be the head coach for this team going into the 2024 NFL season. And there's a number of different ways that we could talk about this. I will start this off first before I throw it over to Justin. I think as we all spoke about on the show, this was the right choice to make. This was the decision that, and we kind of alluded to this when we discussed the firing of McDaniels, and we were talking about like the early games in Pierce's tenure there, right? Of what is the mindset of the top players on this team now, and how are you going to heal things? Because remember, it wasn't just McDaniels; it was the GM Ziegler who's gone. So now they still need to get their GM. There's another team, that in the AFC that hired a head coach that now need to handle the general manager role as well. But if we just focus on this for a second. The Raiders are keeping a guy who, for all intents and purposes, galvanized that locker room, has the trust of a lot of players in there, and I'm sure that includes the top star player. So I think my first gut reaction to this is this was the move that they needed to keep Max Crosby, Devontae Adams, and maybe Josh Jacobs, because I know he's a free agent, but it's going to be a new regime heading in there. Maybe this was the move to get those guys to buy into this team going into 2024 and beyond. Because had they just done the whole go after the biggest, Hollywood type name, I think that would have screwed up a lot of things for the team. I think this was the move needed to galvanize this team. And I think now you can head forward with a little bit more stability and confidence if you're the Raiders going into the offseason. That's just my gut reaction. Justin, what were your reactions to Pierce staying, and what you think? What other impact does it have, whether it's on the Raiders themselves, or even if you want to talk about maybe other candidates that are still out there, one in particular that's trying to return to the NFL, if you think it'd be so fit to discuss?
Well, we could discuss him later, but I think it was the right move in terms of setting a foundation. They had an opportunity to do the same thing a few years back with a playoff team and kind of move things forward in Rick Bisaccia. But they opted not to do that. They went with the flashy head coach. It didn't work out, and now it's a franchise reset move in my mind. I think it's a great move by the Raiders. He's proven to be an excellent head coach and an excellent culture setter. He's the guy that's going to come in and he's going to change the culture of your organization, in my mind. I mean, he's only got how many games of head coach experience. We'll see what he is for real, but he absolutely deserved the opportunity, and it was the right move. And it's something that makes your players happy. It's something that I think across the league, people are saying this is the best move that they've made in a long time. We're gonna have to see. Did they hire a GM yet? So we're gonna have to see what who the GM is when they come in. Obviously, you're gonna think that Antonio Pierce has a loud voice when it comes to figuring out exactly what they want in terms of a GM, but it's the right move, and I do think that they're going to go full reset now because now they're out of a quarterback. We expect Jimmy G to be cut at some point in the offseason. Maybe the kid, the quarterback they have there, who's the rookie?
Aiden O'Connell.
Aiden O'Connell. Maybe he's the answer there, but realistically, I think that maybe they draft another quarterback and they try and reset. I don't expect Devontae Adams to be there. I don't expect Josh Jacobs to be there. Jacoby Myers has played very well for them. He's still under contract. I think Devontae's in his last year of his contract, and Josh Jacobs is a free agent. It doesn't really make sense in my mind to keep those guys. Offensive skill position players have a shelf life, and I'm not expecting Devontae Adams to be done in this league anytime soon, but we see that running backs don't get signed. I expect Josh Jacobs to maybe go to more of a contender towards the end of his career. He's 25, 26. He's still got a couple years left, and I wouldn't be surprised if Devontae is traded as well. But that defense will be a solid piece for him. They're going to keep Max Crosby. They're going to build upon what they have on defense, and they're really going to get something going there. And I think the culture you could see is already starting to shift. Now, whether or not they can capitalize on that and get some wins, we'll see next season. But I think it was the right move for them going forward.
Yeah, no, everything you said, and then you can kind of compare this. A former player now taking over the reins. It's working in Houston. It's working in Detroit. It maybe could work in turning things around in New England. That's a former player that's been in the organization, going to do things differently from the previous coach. Ironically, this is now a former player that is taking over from a coach with Patriots ties. Maybe just kind of get rid of, these Patriots coordinators and coaches and all the like. But in all seriousness, no, I'm with you, Justin. I think this is the setting of a base of a foundation of a culture that, they find. I think the thing we're shocked by, and the reason why it's in the title in all caps, they finally learned from a mistake. This is something that the Raiders have done constantly. And the main example we have is Rich Bisaccia and what happened a couple of years ago with, not letting him continue to be the guy, and they end up going with McDaniels. But it's like, even I'm sure we could cite examples before this, both with them and other teams where it's like, you had the guy, you could have just done that. Carolina, Steve Wilkes and the amazing job that he did, finished that season, I think, at or just a game above 500. And, the owner said, nah, I want to go with my own guy. And we see the spot that they're in now with, forcing quarterback selections and the like. Finally, Mark Davis learned, you know what? Let me go with the guy that people are going to like. the definitive thing that I know, and that is Antonio Pearson. Like you said, Justin, the GM hires and waiting. We'll see. Maybe, like you said, Pearson could have some influence when it comes to that. I still wouldn't, take the realm out of the realm of possibility that they could keep their top two skill position players, because if they want to be,
it's impossible. But I mean,
they're going to have to keep them if they want to be competitive. At least one of them.
If they can add some pieces to that defense and they'll go younger, they'll draft a lot of players. Jacoby Myers is still there. He had an excellent year. They could go out and get some, young receiver talent. And if you can get some solid capital back, it might not be up to them. I mean, they could franchise tag Jacobs for a second year in a row, but yeah, I don't see that necessarily happening. I don't think that he'd be very happy with that. And does Devontae want to go through a rebuild? I mean, Devontae is 32 years old now. He's, coming on the back half of his career, and he's still very valuable at this point. You could maybe not try and be competitive and get nothing for him next year, and he'll maybe leave if they're not successful. Or you can, start your rebuild. And by starting your rebuild, you can get rid of a player that's probably not going to be there for your success anyways. You know what I mean? You might as well get something for him. This was the big issue that we had with the Broncos last year, or I guess this year, when they had all of these guys that hey, in October, we knew that we were probably going to get rid of Russell Wilson if he didn't restructure. We are going full reset this year if we don't win some games. And then still didn't trade any of the guys that are going to be gone. I mean, if you can get a 5th round pick, a 6th round pick for Jerry Jeudy, and you know he's not going to be there next year, why are you keeping him? Just get rid of him. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't make any sense in that context. So if you have Devontae Adams, you know he's not going to be there for your championship roster unless you are sure you're going to have a championship level roster next year and win these games. Which I don't know if you know, they're still the Raiders. Like I don't expect them to be the cream of the crop in a year. They need a lot of assets.
I mean, that division was a lot more wide open than we thought this season. I'm just saying.
You say that, but we still have the Chiefs in the divisional round. They wrapped up the conference. I'm sorry, the division 3 weeks early before the end of the season. Like, as much as you want to say it, the most disappointing team.
I think it was the second to last week because remember the Raiders beat them.
I don't think it mattered. I think it was a meaningless game.
No, it didn't. No, it didn't. The Raiders technically still had a chance at that division. The Chiefs hadn't clinched the division yet.
Okay, so they did it 2 weeks early instead of 3 weeks early. The point is, it wasn't really close. I mean, they didn't even play the last week, really, the Chiefs. You know what I mean? Like, they could have I don't think it was that close of a race in my mind. And the Chiefs were disappointing this year. All right, like, let's see them try and go out and get some offensive weapons, and we'll discuss their offseason coming up. But there's a lot of ground to gain, a lot of ground. I mean, you could even say that the Chargers, even though they had the more disappointing season, they're farther along in roster build right now than the Raiders are.
Yes, but they're going to have to let go of some of the guys. They have the second worst cap situation in the league.
Of course. And guess what? I am sure that they are going to either cut or trade some of these big name players, get some assets, bring in a coach, and draft well because they've drafted well. I know they're going to have a new GM this year, but we'll see. I don't expect them to waste any more of Justin Herbert's career. You know what I mean?
Oh, that's a bold decision right there.
I expect them to try and go out and make the right moves. Whether or not they do is a different story.
Will they waste Joe Herbert's career? Because that's a big
we'll find out. As long as they don't waste Justin Burrow's career.
Exactly. We love old jokes
That's
here.
An old joke now. I haven't made that mistake in a long time.
You know, you've been very good. You've been very good about that. Yeah.
Maybe it helps that they both missed the playoffs this year, so they didn't have to worry about it.
No, actually, that's not
injured.
bad. So to Justin's point, it's going to be an interesting scenario for the Raiders for their draft pick because the free agent pool for quarterbacks is not the greatest. I mean, aside from Kirk Cousins, if Minnesota moves on from him, which I don't know if they're going to, but there's not a whole lot of guys that are there. Maybe you can try and convince Baker Mayfield to go somewhere else or Gardner Minshew, but there's not really a lot of talent that's there that's on the side of, that hill, the 30 hill, if you will. So maybe you're drafting a quarterback here, but I don't know necessarily if that's the way they should go. But I know Champ Kelly, who's the interim GM, has been in discussion to become the permanent GM. But Mark Davis has also mentioned he might want to reorganize the football office, and maybe Champ Kelly becomes director of football operations, and they get a GM after that. We'll see. Let's talk about this. This is the leveling out from the John Gruden disaster. Both terms were disaster if you think about the Raiders' history because they lost Super Bowl after he left. And then the second term with all the emails that came out, it was not pretty. And Justin's right. They had the chance with Rich Bisaccia, who the players loved, and instead they wanted to go for the flashy, cool hire, and Ronald McDonald didn't do his damn job, and now he's out of a job. So there you go. But yeah, look, Antonio Pierce, when he got into this role, I remember reading an article that said that he was not hired to coach, he was hired to lead. And I think you can say without a shadow of a doubt that he led this team. Like he revitalized a lot of, good feelings in that locker room with guys like Devontae, guys like Max Crosby, who, let's be real here, if the Raiders didn't keep Antonio Pierce, Max Crosby would have walked. I think him being there, him still being around is a big key to why Crosby will be the face of this franchise next season. Whether they keep Jacobs or Adams, I don't know. Whether they draft a quarterback, O'Connell wasn't great, but he's still young. But,
He showed.
They have an interesting spot. I think they have a top 10 pick, but they might miss that top tier of quarterback, and they could be in that sweet spot for a franchise left tackle or a good receiver like a Malik Neighbors out of LSU. So there's a lot of ways they could kind of go, but this was the right stepping stone for them to move forward. And it's refreshing to me that an organization that was riddled with so much, tension and so much issues does the right thing, hires a solid pick as their head coach, a guy who proved himself, and a guy who they take the interim tag off. Now, listen, they also took the interim tag off of Tom Cable a while ago. We saw how well that worked out. It didn't, spoiler alert. But this was the right call because if it wasn't here, Pierce would have been taken by somebody else. I believe that if he wasn't picked as the Raiders head coach, he would have been the no-shot, no way not shoo-in candidate for the Giants defensive coordinator. He would have gone home to them. But let's see what he does in the full season. Give him a shot. They still have, I think, the fourth best roster in their division. They have good pieces, but they still have glaring holes here or there. But let's see. Let's see what happens in the offseason with them. But I think the fact that they have at least this tentpole correct is miles away from any Vegas/Oakland team. You hear that, John Fisher? Any/Vegas/Oakland team that's not doing the right thing here. So I give it to them. They hired the right guy. Absolutely.
And we'll see if they can do that with the general manager coming in, with the coach already being in place, and the 13th overall pick in this next draft, just outside of the top 10, with the likes of, the Jets are the 10th overall pick, and the Bears being the 9th overall pick. So there's that. Those picks belong to two people on this panel. We'll see if they get those picks or others when we do our mock draft in a couple of months. But with that being said, now it should be interesting to see what happens. But we're just more impressed with the fact that they did keep Pearson. Like you said, Rick, I think Max Crosby, above all, is still going to be a Raider next season because they kept Antonio Pierce. Because that dude, I don't think he wants to lose anymore. Just a hint, just a thought. He probably doesn't want to lose there anymore. So we'll see what the future of this roster is, to say the very least. They have fourth best in the division, worse than the Broncos. That is, I disagree with that, but man, that is a rough reality if that is the case. Anyways, moving on from that, let's move on from the Raiders. They're not in the playoffs. So we don't care about them. We care about the playoff teams at this time of the year, ladies and gentlemen. So let's go through a wild card recap. And boys, this first one, we could deliberate with this as much as we want to, but I think there is a simple way for the first topic for us to discuss. CJ Stroud is him. This dude, not even with his full weaponry going into. So first off, winning the AFC South this season, as we've discussed, a phenomenal year for the Texans, from last year being in the game in the end of the season to decide who was getting the first overall pick, to the end of the season winning the AFC South and winning a playoff game against one of the most stout defenses in the league. Clearly, Rick, I'll throw it to you first. Joe Flacco, the Linsanity run came to an end, as everyone joked, but it just goes to show that, you kind of need a good quarterback. The problem is Cleveland didn't necessarily have that good of a quarterback throughout the 4 tries that they had this season, unfortunately. So, but with that being said, while we can malign the mistakes that Cleveland made, we can very much say the fact that CJ Stroud and the Houston Texans are going to be a threat in the AFC for a decent chunk of time. 16 of 21 passing, 274 yards, 3 touchdowns, just absolutely cerebral in that game against the Browns.
And you know what the funny thing is, too? You forget that this is a kid who played in 2 massive collegiate postseason games in his time at Ohio State. The Rose Bowl, he was dominant 2 years ago. And then last year, even though they lost that game to Georgia, he kept them in that game all the way to the end, that 45-44 classic. I also want to say this. I know the talk's about C.J. Stroud, and I'll get back to him in a second, but Nico Collins has had one of the quietest 1,300-yard seasons I think we've ever seen. This is a guy who, the 2 seasons prior, combined for just over 900 yards receiving and 3 touchdowns. This year, 80 catches, 1,300 yards in the regular season, and 8 scores. And he goes 6 for 96 in a score. And look at the game against the Colts. He was on fire. And I know that because the guy I was facing in fantasy had him, and it ruined my night. But that being said, This is an incredible run. Now, this is a team that has no expectations, right? They had the number 2 overall pick and traded to get the number 3 overall pick to get the best quarterback in this draft, and I think one of the best defensive players in this draft. I know we talked about him heavily going into the season, Will Anderson Jr. But this is a team that it just clicked. Like, DeMeco Ryans was the right guy, and he brought in a sense of just energy. CJ Stroud, when he was out for a bit, they did lose their way. Tank Dell was gone. They haven't gotten the production from Dalton Schultz that they might have expected from him as a tight end, but Devin Singletary's had a renaissance year, and you're right. The ice water that runs through this kid's veins, there is no challenge that is too big for him. They were a team that was not supposed to be in this playoff run. They were also facing a team that wasn't supposed to be in the playoff run either, because Cleveland wasn't supposed to be here either. Let's call it what it is here. But the fact of the matter is that CJ Stroud just proved that he's the best guy from this draft class on the offensive side of the ball. It's funny when you have
maybe overall, Rick. Maybe. Pick be danged.
It's funny when you have a pick that falls to you, and thank you, Carolinas. Houston, send them all the holiday fruit baskets for the rest of your life.
Thank you, Dave Tepper.
Exactly.
Thank you, Dave Tepper. Oh my God.
To your point, there's no fear in this kid, and there's no fear in this team. And that is kind of scary going forward, because they're playing with house money right now, man. They're one of the last 8 teams. Who would have said the Houston Texans are a game away from the AFC Championship game? 1 win away from the AFC title game. I don't think we could have predicted that in any run. Any simulation would have never predicted that. So give them all the props, man. They're playing loose. They're playing spirited. And it's all because Stroud is the right guy. And you know what? I hate it for Davis Mills, because I think he was serviceable, but he's now
not this.
He's now a good garbage time quarterback. That's all he is, because Stroud is just that damn good. No question.
Yeah, and hey, if you're Davis Mills, you can make a career of being the backup just to this guy. Yeah. If the Texans like him that much and they like him within the building,
he could just, Daniel had, man.
We're talking about, and I was talking about this with my friend. The Texans potentially have their head coach and their quarterback for a decade locked in, because I remember one of the things, I forget who said this. It may have just been a podcaster that I just was hearing throughout the offseason, trying to recollect on notes. Is that somebody said that DeMeco Ryans would be is the right coach for the time being to get this team off the ground before he gets fired and then the next guy comes in. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think DeMeco Ryans is going to be the guy for this team going forward. And kind of like you said, Antonio Pierce being a leader, Rick, I don't think it's necessarily that. I think because we've seen DeMeco Ryans as a defensive coordinator on a successful team in San Fran. We've seen what he did. Have you guys seen the clip where he was going over the play with his guy on the sideline, and then the next time they're out there, they pick off Joe Flacco for one of those picks? This guy can coach defense. If he just has the right person helping CJ Stroud, and if he's just a galvanizer for the offense with his experience in locker rooms on successful teams, what reason would there be, aside from ego of a general manager and even an owner, to get rid of this guy? So actually, maybe that is going to be what influences the Texans 3 or 4 years from now. Well, but that being said, the Texans a year ago, they were competing for the first overall pick. They didn't get it. And a lot of people, I don't think us in particular, but a lot of people maligned them for that. That win screwed them over from getting the first overall pick.
Oh, we're bringing this up again? We're bringing that up again?
No, I'm not talking about it with our pick challenge. I'm saying I remember on the internet, plenty of people were saying that the Texans screwing themselves out of the first overall pick was not a good thing for this franchise, because they were going to get the second quarterback, and that wasn't going to go well for them. Turns out the second quarterback, who should have been first, this show called that, by the way, was really good and was the exact thing that they needed. So all the props in the world.
And the thing is, too, that they have to do whatever they can now at this point to hang on to Bobby Slowick, their OC. He is a guy who's going to get head coaching interviews, and he's the guy that's made CJ Stroud really good as well in the NFL. He's helped that transition, too. And if he does leave, they might fall off, because they have magic right now. They've got it bottled up. You just got to keep it in Houston. Like, I understand that you want to be a head coach, but look at Pete Carmichael just got fired. He was there for 31 years with New Orleans. If it works, hang on to it. Hang on.
Hey, make him the highest paid OC in the league if that's what it takes to keep him.
Absolutely.
Like, come on. There's no salary cap with your coaching staff. Just pay the man. If that's what it takes to keep him, pay the man. So, Justin, your thoughts about CJ Stroud being him?
Look, the kid's on fire. I mean, this is arguably like the one team outside of the tops, which are obviously the Ravens and the 49ers. This is one team I don't want to play. The way that offense is firing, I mean, they torched the Browns defense. You take those 2 touchdowns out, the two pick sixes, and I mean, they still put up 31 points in a playoff game against one of the best defenses in the NFL right now. They absolutely torched them. And let's face it, it was mostly in the first half, and if they needed to, they probably could have scored more. I mean, it was never, maybe towards the end of the first half, it was a little close. This game never felt like it was going to go the Cleveland Browns way. And it was an issue that they had all year on quarterback. But I'm really concerned about the way the defense performed in this big game. I mean, they looked like they weren't prepared. They looked like they were not ready for the big moment. And, it's got to come down to some of those leaders on that defense. Are these guys that, sure, they're great stat producers and they're great, locker room guys, but are they winners at this point? That's what you have to come out and ask. Do they have the pieces there that will win you a championship? And again, maybe the issue comes down to quarterback, but when you're playing a rookie quarterback, missing his top 2 receivers or 2 of his top receivers in a playoff game, and you get absolutely demolished, everyone's going to get called into question. Every single person.
To Justin's point also, 0 sacks.
Yeah, I was just about to make that
CJ Stroud at all.
Yeah, they just had their way. I don't know if it was the perfect game plan. I don't know if the Browns just weren't prepared or weren't ready, but it was a perfect game, at least offensively, for CJ Stroud and the Texans offense. Nico Collins demolished. I mean, how many touchdowns were over 25 yards?
I think all of them.
Yeah,
I think it was all 3. All 3 of the ones through the air.
The first one wasn't, but then the second one was 76, and the third one was 37 yards. Then there was the 2 pick sixes, and then there was 2 touchdowns in the teens. So, I mean, CJ Stroud had 3 touchdowns in the first half.
Brevin Jordan, huh? 76, one catch, 76 yards. Took it to the house. That's wild.
Yeah, I mean, for Nico Collins to have 6 yards and 96 yards, 6 receptions, 96 yards, and a touchdown. And just to dominate the game the way they did. Like I said, they didn't have.
It could have been more.
Yeah, they didn't have. Did Robert Woods play?
If he did
as well, right?
He had 1 catch for 11 yards, boys. How dare we forget Bobby Trees?
But Dalton Schultz, that 37-yard touchdown was his only catch as well.
It was same with Brevin Jordan. Each of the tight ends had 1 catch. It didn't matter for every. Like to what we're saying. If this Texans team had Tank Dell right now, I think we would be considering them as a heavy upset favorite, and we are still doing so going into the next round, which we'll get to the breakdowns of that here in a little bit. But oof, man, the Texans did their thing, and like you said, Justin, there's questions now coming up in Cleveland because that was not an impressive performance. Well, in any way, shape, or form.
They were very impressive, 11-6 team. I mean, they focused heavily on the defense. They overcame a lot of adversity. Started 4 quarterbacks, including reviving Joe Flacco from the grave. But this was disappointing.
Yeah, and now this is a team that you would think, in theory, because they've paid a franchise quarterback and they're bringing him back and they're getting Nick Chubb from injury, but will Nick Chubb be the same? Will they finally figure things out with their quarterback? You have to wonder if this was lost valor for the Browns. Is this their one shot that they had and they just completely blew it? Because I got to say, even with the 11-6, man, it's hard to keep teams together, especially with how much they paid that quarterback. I don't know if this Browns team is going to be the same going into next season. This may have been their opportunity, and they may have just served as yet another stepping stone in what is the early career brilliance of CJ Stroud, to say the very least. And I don't think that's hyperbole. I think that's just a pure fact, to say the very least. So there's that. All right. We might be talking about the two teams. Well, yeah, I think we might be talking about the two teams that lost in these next two games here. But let's bring it up. The Chiefs and the Bills handled business during Wild Card Weekend, ladies and gentlemen. Two teams that, were very intriguing coming into this. Former AFC Championship game finalists in the past against one another. The Chiefs, of course, the AFC has run through them the last couple of years. Not so this season, but they did at least get one home playoff game, and the Chiefs made it count with a 26-7 victory against the Miami Dolphins. Combine those scores, it makes 33, and that's kind of what it was in that game, negative 33 degrees in terms of the temperature. Oof, Maron, it was not good. How much? It was. I think I saw double-digit fans had to go to the hospital after that for that weather. Not fun. And just stay home. Just stay home and watch it. But anyways, there was that game. And incongruous because, again, these two teams are about to face off with one another. So we'll get to that game in particular in a moment. Bills-Steelers, 31-17. This game was supposed to happen on Saturday. It was supposed to be the nightcap, if I'm not mistaken, if memory serves. Or was it the afternoon game?
It was supposed to be Sunday afternoon.
Was it the Sunday game? I thought it was the Saturday game.
Yeah, it was supposed to be Sunday afternoon, and they pushed it back to Monday afternoon.
Yeah, which
supposed to be 3 games on Sunday. Yeah, it was 2-3-1.
Yep. So that being said, the Bills, day delayed, didn't matter. They won. They handled business against the Steelers team that, are we really surprised that they lost with Mason Rudolph as the quarterback? But that being said, the Bills handled business. The Chiefs handled business. I know we can talk about them, but we might be saving a little bit of it when we talk about the divisional round games themselves. So, Rick, I'll throw it to you first in this regard. Any comments you want to make about the Bills and Chiefs, you can. But there's also some discourse to be had about the losers of both of these games, because now some futures are being called into question in both the Dolphins and the Steelers.
You know what? The Steelers kept this game a lot closer than you would anticipate. I mean, they were competitive. Obviously, they didn't have T.J. Watt, but they were still somewhat competitive. They were within a score in the fourth quarter, because when Rudolph threw that touchdown pass to Calvin Austin, they were down 24-17. So, the Bills weren't impressive, but they did enough to win the game. And the Chiefs kind of strolled, because Miami, we talked about them all last week, how they had nobody. They were not at all at full strength. Their offense was banged up. Their defense was missing key guys. And, this was a game that was just rough on all ends here. Now, to your points about I'll focus on Miami, because Pittsburgh, I think, Tomlin's sticking around for this year, this coming year, and they maybe want to bring in some quarterbacks to compete with Kenny Pickett. That's fine. But, they were the third best team in their division. So, congrats on making it to the playoffs. You surprised a lot of people. Not this guy, because I picked you at 7th seed. Thank you very much. But let's talk about Miami. I think this could have been a case of a disappointing season as well, in the Would You Rather as well. Because, yeah, injuries are injuries, and you try and avoid them as much as you can if you're smart about it, which Mike McDaniel wasn't, because Bradley Chubb, I still will say, why were you out there in that blowout against the Ravens? They did not look good in this game. Raheem Mostert was silenced. If it wasn't for that 53-yard touchdown catch by Tyreek, he would have had nothing. Jalen Waddle was kind of not really there at all. And Tua didn't even look good, man. Again, and here's the thing, too. When we talk about the Chiefs, we don't talk about their defense a whole lot, because it really is Mahomes and Kelsey and those guys, and Tua later said Rashee Rice, who, excellent pick by us, talking about him in our draft, and he's been phenomenal this season for them. But, the defense kind of gets lost in the shuffle. But if you're an elite quarterback, you should carve up a defense like this. You should look across the line and see Karlaftis and Bolton and even Trent McDuffie and L'Jarius Sneed and say, I can get at least over 250 yards against them. And what did Tua have? 199. Now, I understand there are certain pieces that were missing as well, but at the same time, too, there were moments during this game in the highlights that I saw, because, again, I boycotted it because it was on Peacock, damn you NFL, that it just didn't look like they were in sync. It looked like they weren't prepared, or they weren't ready. And that shows you if you go through the whole run, they had the least amount of points in Wild Card Weekend. The Eagles had more than them, and the Eagles were trash. The Dolphins had the least amount of points. This high-power offense that scored 70 on the Broncos can't get over 10 against the Chiefs in the playoffs, can't even have a respectable showing? Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm calling shenanigans. I'm calling fraudulence on this Dolphins team. When they get healthy, they'll probably be back to their form, but can you trust it? It's like you said with the Cowboys and the Would You Rather jerk. We've been waiting for a Dolphins Super Bowl run for how many years now? They didn't have one in Marino. They haven't had one with Marino ever. And they haven't had one since. Like, Don Shula's boys who were perfect, like, pop your champagne all you want, but that was 50 years ago?
Yeah.
Like, this is supposed to be one of the 10 poles of the AFC, and they're this?
And you mentioned Shula, Rick, because I think at the time of his retirement, they were, if not the winningest, one of the 2 or 3 winningest franchises in the history of the league. And it's been downhill ever since. And you mentioned the skill position players and how they did not perform. This is the second year in a row now between Waddle and Hill. And they had the excuse potentially last season because it was Skylar Thompson in that game against Buffalo. They still almost won. But in that game, Hill didn't go over 70 yards, and Waddle, I think, barely eclipsed 40. In this one, Hill doesn't go over 70 yards. Waddle barely eclipsed 30. Their second best wide receiver yards-wise was Cedric Wilson Jr. Raise your hand if you forgot he was still on the team. I knew he had signed with them like 2 years ago. I forgot they still kept him.
I knew they had Jeff Wilson for a bit, but I forgot about Cedric.
And then their third leading receiver in this game, not Jalen Waddle, River Craycraft. So there's that.
Who?
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's like you mentioned. The thing with this team, and someone did the math. I wish I had saved like the stat that I saw, but it was something about the fact that the Dolphins have lost their last maybe 7 games that were a certain degrees below like 0, I think, or something. And it's like, here's the thing: at the end of the day, if you're Miami, and you mentioned this, Rick, if you don't want to deal with the cold weather, win the AFC, get the number 1 seed, where you had a chance at the end of the season on home turf to clinch at least the 2 seed, and you wouldn't have faced the Bills. You would have, if everything else had still, well, actually, no, wait. Would they have faced the Bills had they beaten them in that game? Then maybe they still would have.
The Bills would have been the 6, I think.
No, if they would have
beat the Bills in Week 18.
Beat the Bills, they would have been the 6th. Yeah,
because Pittsburgh was locked into the 7th.
If Jacksonville won and the Steelers won, and then Miami won, the Bills would have been eliminated.
Yeah,
right.
I think, and then Houston would have been probably the 7th, I think.
Right.
Yes.
Well, I'm saying, like, had everything else like stayed the same going into that, and it would have been the case. So I guess it would have been Dolphins Steelers. At least you're home for that, and still no T.J. Watt. Probably a fair shot to win the game. Maybe it's even closer than what this Bills Steelers game was. And then you have that second game in the postseason again at home, and then you would have only had 1 cold game to deal with against a Baltimore team, which, the last couple times you faced, not so much this season, but last season you had like. If you're Miami and if you don't want to deal with the cold weather, you just have to win. And this is the thing with this team. And you mentioned Tua, Rick, this is going to be the catch-22 of this squad because, yes, Tua, I think he led the league in passing yards at the end of the season statistically. He has shown himself to be pretty good. But there's just something about the fact that last year he couldn't even make it to the postseason, and this year he did nothing in the postseason. He might as well have not have been in the dang game in some instances because that's how little the offense was doing. And it almost gets to a point where if you're going to keep him, how is that going to look like? Tua cannot be, we talk about quarterbacks that have to one up on each other on contracts. And this past offseason, it was Hurts and Lamar, and then it became the Herbert and Burrow deals. And then Mahomes renegotiated his $500 million contract and, moving around that money. So obviously the Mahomes thing is like in its own category. Tua can't be paid more than whoever's the least between Hurts, Lamar, Herbert, and Burrow. I think it's Hurts because he signed the first of those 4. And there's questions about him right now with that contract, too. You can't even pay Tua more than him.
Not even that, too.
You can't justify it.
To your point, not only did Tua have the most passing yards in the regular season, Tyreek had 1,800 receiving yards. And both those guys are out because of this paltry showing in Kansas City.
He was first. And we're talking about going into the season, the disappointment of Germany being the Chiefs-Dolphins Hill revenge game, and then they get it in the playoffs, and they just didn't show up for it. It's like, dude, at the end of the day, you got to be able to win in the cold. I don't know what to tell you. Like, I'm sorry. It would be nice if everyone had a dome, but, these teams just don't do that. The Bills especially.
Yeah. But also, look at the last 5 games that Miami played in the regular season. A 1-point loss to the Titans. A 30-0 win over the Jets, which, no offense, by that point, who were the Jets playing? A 22-20 win over the Cowboys, which was a last-second field goal that got them the win.
Yep.
A 56-19 blowout by the Ravens when they had already clinched everything up, when you think they should rest the guys, but they didn't. And then the Buffalo game, when you could have knocked out the Bills, but, obviously the results went their way. But going into it, before the day, you could have knocked out the Bills.
Yep. Or, again, at least kept the second seed. You would have had 2 home playoff games had you gotten the job done. And Josh Allen was having a terrible game. Like, Josh Allen did not Superman his team into winning. No, the Bills were able to get that through, dirty, grimy football. I'm not saying dirty plays. I'm saying, defense first. There's just something about this Dolphins team that is a complete disconnect when it comes to the end of the regular season, the most important games. And then it's because, remember, the last year of Brian Flores, I think, they had a chance at the 7th seed, and the Bills dropped 50 on them. This Dolphins team cannot win when it matters. And it's 3 years in a row where critical game has to happen. Ironically, it's against Buffalo three of the last 4 years. I think every single year. 3 of the last 4, but the 3 years in a row now. Their last game of the season at the hands of Buffalo. Just something that they can't get it done. It's insane. I'll be quick with this. Shout out to the Bills over the Steelers. I think the Tomlin thing was very telling. The fact that he did not answer a question post-game, which, we give a lot of other people flack for that. I would like my leader of men to be a bit more professional and not be a coward and run away from the podium. But with that being said, a lot of questions about the Steelers going into next season. Who is the quarterback going to be? Are they going to go out? Well, they should go after someone. Let's not even say that. They should be going after someone, but who would that even be is the question. I don't think Kenny Pickett can be the quarterback of this team going into 2024 because I don't think there will be a lot of success there. And what is the future going to be for the frustrated wide receivers? Was this just them still trying to get over the start of the season under Canada, or do they just not know how to figure things out with Pickens and Deontay Johnson on a consistent basis? Hey, George Pickens getting an 80-yard touchdown once every 3 games is cool. We need more consistency than that. And there, we just said with the Browns, there are going to be some changes. There needs to be soul searching when it comes to the Steelers because, okay, 7th seed is cool. You keep losing to the 2 seed. When are you going to win again? It's been a long time since they won a playoff game. It's been a long time since Mike Tomlin's won a playoff game. And I understand this is me because I don't have an NFL team I root for that is mired in, mediocrity or even less than. Yes, I understand the point of view. If you are the Arizona Cardinals right now, you would kill for what the Steelers have had the last 6 years, which is, 3 or 4 playoff appearances in the last 6 years? Yes, they lose the first game every single time. But that's not the Steelers. That's the franchise that is tied for the most Super Bowls all time. This is the franchise that has won Lombardi, that has hosted Lombardi, that with this coach has won the Lombardi. At some point, 7th seed and playoff appearances don't cut it anymore. And if I'm not mistaken, 2024 is the last year of his contract, correct?
I believe so, yeah.
And what do the Steelers do, boys? Unless you're really, really bad at your job like Matt Genda, they don't fire you. They just let you go. If Mike Tomlin starts next season without a contract for 2025, that's going to be an interesting conversation to have, to say the very least. And I think that's something to look to. That's just because I'm saying that's literally how the Steelers do it. Aside from Canada, when was the last time they fired a coach?
1943 or whatever it was. Yeah, it's been a very long time.
Well, mid-season, yeah.
Or even at the end of the year. They don't even, guys with a year left on a deal, they just let them ride out the last season and then they replace them. They've done that with coordinators before.
Yeah.
It's either contract runs out or they retire. This team, they're not going to fire him, and I'm not even justifying that. No, you don't fire him. But I think it's very telling if they don't give him a contract for 2025 going into next season. I think that's going to say a lot of different things about the Steelers that maybe we weren't expecting from this franchise. So there's that. Justin, again, we're going to talk about these teams in the next round, so maybe you could say what you want about them, but about the losers, if you have any notes.
The question about Tomlin is at what point, he's the longest tenured head coach. He is a Hall of Fame coach in my mind. He is excellent, among the top coaches in the league. But at what point does it become stale? Is my question. It's a little different, but you look at Marvin Lewis in Cincinnati, and he was there for 11, 12, 13 years. He made the playoffs consistently, but they never won a playoff game. how many opportunities do you have to lose playoff games in the first round? And there's only so many bites at the apple, so to speak, before there's nothing left. So, I mean, as great as Tomlin is, and as much as I would think it would be a mistake to get rid of him, you might just need a change in scenery in Pittsburgh. I mean, they were bad for a number of years in way before my lifetime, but I don't expect them to go back to something like that. They're a well-run organization. Maybe it's time for fresh blood in there. I don't know. I'm not, like I said, you'd be hard pressed for me to choose a coach that's a better coach than Mike Tomlin. He's a leader of men. He's an excellent football coach. He knows the game. He knows how to coach. I don't know how many, as a franchise, I don't know how many playoff losses I can have in a row after that. I mean, if you really think about it, who built that Super Bowl winning team that he coached?
It's definitely Bill Cowher.
Yeah,
and the old GM who's not there anymore,
Yeah.
Colbert.
Yeah.
and don't get me wrong, they've kept things afloat. But for the Steel City in a place they call Titletown, how many losses have they had in a row in the first round now?
Yep.
5. Not great.
Yeah.
And in terms of Miami, I mean, the injuries were a disappointment, sure. I mean, you expected their defense to be healthier and hopefully, maybe hold the Chiefs back a little bit. But the issue was on offense. I mean, Tua was bad, man. I know you didn't watch that game, Rick. He was overthrowing guys, underthrowing guys. And you look at his stats, and it's very skewed by the one touchdown that Tyreek had. That was an amazing run by Tyreek. It wasn't even like because, Tua made a great play. It was Tyreek being Tyreek Hill. You take that out, and he's, 19 for 38 for under 150 yards and an interception. He was bad this weekend. Really, really bad. So maybe the weather is at fault, but it's the NFL. There's going to be games you have to play in cold weather. There's going to be games where you're going to have to overcome adversity like this. And the Dolphins just, when everything goes right, they're a team you don't want to face. But when something goes wrong, they don't seem to be the team that can overcome adversity. And that's a major issue if you want to win a Super Bowl, obviously.
Yeah.
So we'll see how they address it in the offseason. I mean, maybe they come back a little bit stronger next year. Hopefully they come back a little bit healthier. But this was a chance for Tua to silence a lot of people. And he made the whispers a little bit louder.
Yep. And to your point, Justin, about the 53-yarder by Hill, if you take away the 53 yards there, it's
under 150. He had 199 before that. So
well, right, but not only that, if you take away the 53-yarder from Hill's stat line as well, you only have 4 catches for 9 yards.
Yeah, but again, if you watch that game, a lot of the time you saw Tua throwing the ball, and you're like, who is he throwing it to?
No, I understand that. But it's also telling that the wide receiver who led the league in yards was 1 catch away from less than 10 receiving yards in the game. That would have been less receiving yards in this game than the names I had mentioned before. That also would have been less receiving yards than Devon Achane and Durham Smythe. So,
well, and for a guy that had arguably one of the best receiving years of all time, I mean, he was top 10 in receptions and not receptions. He was top 10 in receiving yards and receiving touchdowns for a year. And I think he was top 20 in receptions. He had a fantastic year, and he didn't play every game. There was games where he went out early. There was games where he flat out missed. And to have those kind of stats and then do almost nothing in the wild card. And I get that the weather was a major factor. It was cold there. I mean, you see the videos of the beers freezing and the water is coming out of the refrigerator and immediately freezing. But
Andy Reid's frozen mustache.
But you know what's funny about that though? Hasn't Tyreek Hill played in these conditions much of his career? Didn't he just move to Miami a couple seasons ago?
I mean, he didn't play in -33, but I see your point. Yes, he has played cold weather.
Game of all time. I mean,
I do want to see.
Game.
I do want to see Tua's splits between games that are played above freezing or below freezing.
Oh, I think it's very drastic.
I think that they've had it before.
Tua below freezing is like a bottom 6 quarterback in this league. It's not even close.
Yeah.
He's one of the worst quarterbacks in the league when it comes to cold games. And look, man, you want to talk about beating allegations? Come on, dude. You, like there's a certain we talked about the going into the season, the certain level of quarterbacking that is required to win in this league, and what constitutes being considered elite. I'll say that some guys took themselves out of that conversation with how they performed this weekend. It's not just he could come back with 4,500 passing yards again next season. Doesn't matter. Win a playoff game. Win a cold playoff game, because they're probably going to have to do that realistically. Do we think the Dolphins are going to be the first seed next season? Gut reaction right now? I don't think so. And it's not even because of the Bills and the Ravens and whoever. It's because of the fact that, yes, you mentioned they might get healthier, Justin, but Chubb and Phillips both tore their ACLs. Now, I know it's a lot quicker to come back from the ACL, but those two aren't. Chubb, I don't think will be ready at the start of next year. And Phillips, I think, is like, he might.
Absolutely. And look, that was an issue they had this year as well. I mean, they started out hot, but their defense was very banged up in the beginning. You expected the Dolphins to get better. And as guys came back, other guys were going out. They had issues on offense. Things sputtered towards the end.
And then it flipped to where their defense actually played. Their defense did well in the Bills game. Their defense, let's be real here. The offense screwed the defense over in that Titans game. They also screwed me over, but they screwed the defense over with the fact that they could not get a first down worth a dang. Not great, not good, Miami. Not good at all, man.
Well, so before we move on, you do realize, by the way, the Dolphins have the chance to, and I hate this phrase, but do the funniest thing ever.
Yes.
This season. Because Talia Tagovailoa is NFL draft eligible. Yeah. And where did he play college ball? Maryland. And in what conference? The Big Ten. So what did he play in? Cold weather games. I'm just saying, Miami, draft Talia, start 2 of them most of the season. In December, switch to Talia. There you go. Why not? Have a whole Tagovailoa quarterback room. Why not? Get Eddie, the 4th stringer from Samoa. I don't know where he is.
Player? I thought he was transferring.
No,
they denied him.
They denied him. So he has to be eligible for the draft. Yeah. They denied him, but Cam McCormick's got 9 years of eligibility left.
Well, he didn't play in 5 of those 9 years, so it's something to say the least. All right, we'll save the college talk for another episode. Let's move on over to the NFC, where there was at least one close game of Wild Card Weekend. Rams and Lions, boys, was a tale of two halves, to say the very least. These two teams traded offensive possessions and drives back and forth in that first half. The Lions started off opening drive touchdowns. I think it was Montgomery who finished off that drive. Rams fought back with their own. Lions came back, scored a touchdown. I think it was Gibbs who scored the touchdown in the second one from 10 yards out in the red zone. Lions came back in their Rams, came back in their right. Lions came back again. That first half was what we were hoping for from this game. It wasn't the highest scoring game of Wild Card Weekend, but it was the highest scoring one that also happened to be close during Wild Card Weekend. Then everything started to settle in the second half. Defenses came in. You started to see plays from both sides, and ultimately it was just going to come down to which defense was going to bend a bit more and who was going to be able to finally get the stop to settle things and help their team at the very end. And it was ultimately the Detroit Lions winning a playoff game, and they're moving on to the divisional round, where they get another home playoff game. We'll talk about that in a moment. Justin, I'll throw it to you first. This game, finally a competitive game in this round. We were waiting for it at that point. What were your thoughts about the way that this game was between, a back and forth offensive first half and then a defensive battle in the second half?
The refs almost tried to take it from him again, too. That was a hell of a thing. But no, listen, they pulled it out. They were the better team. They were the better team in the regular season. They were the better team that day. I know that the Rams were tough. That was a team that I really didn't want to play in the playoffs if I was, an NFC team. But they've proven that the Lions are for real right now. Now, the question to me is, or not the question, but the worry is, as a Jets fan, when you have a big playoff win, don't be hungover the next week. We need to perform again this week. They have a tough matchup. They need to bring their A game, because you don't want to lose to Baker Mayfield. I don't know about anyone else, but expecting Baker Mayfield in the NFC Championship game was not among my preseason predictions. So let's settle down. There's still work to be done. There's a great win. It was celebrated heavily, but this is not what they wanted. They don't want a second run out. They want to keep moving forward. And it'll be interesting to see now how far this Lions team can really go. Can they compete with a team like the 49ers if they end up playing them in the NFC Championship game? We're still a little early, but they have a real shot to make some noise now.
Yep. And even they could be one upset away from hosting the NFC Championship game, perhaps, against old Big Brother. Now, wouldn't that be something? But let's not get that far ahead of ourselves. No, I'm with you, Justin. Like, happy for Detroit. I do want to give a shout out to the Rams because was it 7 games into the season? I think we had a factor fiction of like, it was one of your factor fictions, I think, Justin, of our thoughts about the Rams competing for the wild card. I forget what Rick's response was, but I remember saying that I felt that team had a real shot at making the postseason as a lower wild card team. They were able to get it done. It was not easy for them to have to come back from last year. Like, they traded Jalen Ramsey. They cut Bobby Wagner. Like, they had to shed a lot. And there's still, I think,
the Bobby Wagner signing when it happened. I didn't understand the Allen Robinson signing when it happened either. They went and they got guys that had, big performances like 5 years before that, and then haven't been relevant since. And they gave them a whole bunch of money. And then they were like, wow, why are we the oldest, most injured team in the NFL right now?
Yeah. So the Rams did that. They shed a lot. I think they're going to have to shed a little bit as well because they also cut Leonard Floyd from that team last year as well. And I think Dante, they cut a lot. But ultimately speaking, the Rams went with a bit of a youth movement. Turns out, like you said, why sign Allen Robinson when you can draft a guy in the 5th round and turn him into the next great wide receiver on your team? Because that's basically what they did. There's a lot of potential there for the Rams. I think it's definitely all going to hinge on Matthew Stafford. I think Sean McVay is definitely going to be tied to the hip with Stafford for another year or two if Stafford remains. If he doesn't, that's rough of Los Angeles because, as we've detailed before, Rick, there's not a lot behind Matthew Stafford in LA, so there's going to be that. And by Joe, they have their 1st-round pick this year.
Hallelujah for that.
What a time to be alive if you're Los Angeles.
So here are 3 oddball stats from this game that I want to just bring to your attention. Number 1, while the Detroit Lions held Kyren Williams under 70 yards, they still allowed 425 yards of offense, including 180 yards receiving by Puka Nacua, who, if it wasn't for CJ Stroud, would no question be Offensive Rookie of the Year, in my mind. Number 2, of the Rams' 6 scoring drives, was it 6 or 5? 5 scoring drives. The 3 longest drives ended in field goals. Anytime the Lions had a 10-play or more drive go against them, their defense somehow held on. But when it was less than that, touchdowns by Nacua and Atwell. So questionable here or there. And the third biggest thing, and I know this is kind of cherry picking, the score is only 24-23 because a guy who made in his career under 50% of field goals from beyond 50 yards in his career makes a 54-yarder. Now, is that the football gods smiling on Detroit for one game to say, we gave Stafford his Super Bowl, let's give you a win over Stafford to make things right? Possibly, but I got to be honest with you, and Justin's absolutely right about this. I think the Lions could be in trouble this weekend because what have they shown you? What has their secondary shown you against good receiving talent? That it has been a struggle. And who's coming in?
It's a bad matchup.
Mike Evans. It's a very bad matchup for them. And I would love nothing more than for the Lions to get to the NFC Championship game. But let's be honest here. I'm going to go out on a limb and say this, and it's going to be a very controversial statement. Of the 4 teams in the NFC that are remaining, they're number 4 for me. They are. Because if they get to the NFC title game, they're either going to San Francisco, which is not a favorable matchup, or they're hosting a Green Bay team that embarrassed them at home on Thanksgiving with Jordan Love firing on all cylinders. I'm sorry, but I do not feel confident in this Lions team at all. I don't. I mean, their running game is good with Montgomery and Gibbs, but that defense is just so questionable that unless they figure it out and shore themselves up, they could be done this week. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case, but I do not like them going to the Super Bowl anymore. And that was my pick, but after seeing this game, I have a lot of reservations about it, and I hope they prove me wrong.
Well, if there's one positive you want to take from the defense is, like you said, Rick, the drives that they were able to hold the Rams to just a field goal. they showed great red zone defense. Now, is that maybe because for whatever reason Sean McVay said, well, screw it, we'll just throw it to Cooper Kupp on every single play? Yeah, maybe it's easy to read one play after a while. But in that same regard, I definitely get what you're saying. I don't know if I'd put them fourth necessarily, but I do get what you're saying that while this was a big win for Detroit, we can never take that away. They finally won a playoff game. Somewhere name whatever deceased president you want that was alive back last time the Lions won a game. They won it again. And they have that. We'll see what they can do. But they got this win here. That being said, it's still a 50-50 trade. People were trying to say I love the discourse of the trade that people are trying to act like the Stafford deal wasn't the biggest win-win of all time. It is. People stop trying to sway it one way or the other. Like the Lions got a core. They still need to win with that core. Yes, they got all the picks that they got, and they've made the selections. And they, for the most part, actually looks like they've hit on their selections, which is actually pretty rare in some of these types of trades. That's the reason why it's looking great. But the Rams also got the superb Owl. They got it. You still need to get yours. So, just saying. But again, congratulations, Detroit. Now, talk about the Rams, who, yes, they may have lost, but they have the recent Super Bowl, right? A couple years ago, defending champions, whatever. We have the Lions, who, bright future. The interesting weekend we'll be saying, but bright future. You know what we can still say about the Detroit Lions, though, boys? At least they're playing this weekend.
It's true.
Unlike the NFC least. Man, oh man, what is there to say about this division? We already talked a lot about this. We waxed a little bit of poetic, but dear Lord above, what was this? The Green Bay Packers stormed into Jerry's world with a 48-32 victory over the Dallas Cowboys, which I think now makes it more playoff victories for the Packers in Jerry's world than the Cowboys have, if I'm not mistaken. Is that the stat? And then, only following it up with much more infamy to some extent. The Eagles, one of the most talented teams in the league from top to bottom, we said going into the season. Should have been one of the two contenders in the NFC. Fell to a wild card team. But just maybe they had enough talent to make it past the game. No, they did not. 32-9 defeat in Tampa Bay at the hands of the NFC South champion Buccaneers. First off, the NFC South won a playoff game. No one was saying that first half of the season, and probably even first 3/4 of the season, if we're being honest here.
Both South divisions won, and you know what that means. 2024, we're talking NFC East to start the breakdowns.
Yeah, so ladies and gentlemen, this we might as well make the announcement here. We're going to be changing up. This is months down the line. Jesus Lord, we are great at this. But when it comes to us previewing the division
we've ever had.
Yeah, probably. when it comes to that's scarily accurate.
Yeah.
Months down the line, when we get to previewing the divisions, just like we've done each of the last 2 years, we're going to be doing it a little bit different. We're actually going to go by conference. So we're going to run through one conference in 4 weeks and then another conference in 4 straight weeks. And we've already decided that whichever division gets eliminated first in the playoffs, or at least the best we can say when it comes to first, because the AFC actually has every single division left, which North is the current leader right now because they had 2 of their teams losing the wild card round, to be fair. But realistically, when it comes to that, we decided, well, whoever gets eliminated first, we're just going to talk about them. So NFC least, you're the first team we're talking about when it comes to the NFC this season, this next season, because good Lord above, this division disappointed us this year. We already spoke a lot about these games. You guys can say whatever you want to say, like when I throw it to each of you. Like, let me just say this about the NFC least. We were bamboozled, led astray, run amok, and flat out deceived when it came to the teams in this division this year. Now, I knew the Giants were frauds from day one. I was arguing that I would not pick them as a wildcard team. I got a little bit of pushback on that, but I knew they were not going to make the playoffs this season. So at least we knew that much. Neither of you picked them for the playoffs this year, right?
For the Giants?
Yeah.
We both did.
We did?
Yeah, we both did.
I must have missed 7 seed.
Yeah.
Well, I did not pick them, so I knew they were frauds from a mile away. The Washington Commanders, none of us had any expectations of them. I think we called that properly in its own right. Washington 4th. But these two teams, like, dude, I already hinted at before. Have the Eagles paid their next franchise quarterback too early again? Have they done that again? Because I'm gonna be real with you. You said it before, Rick, when it came to Tua, that an elite quarterback would have been able to go into Kansas City and do something against that defense. Even as good as we are saying that the Kansas City defense is good, an elite quarterback would have at least gone over 225 passing yards for the love of God, or hell, even 200. An elite quarterback can win a game without their number one wide receiver. It's possible. It's happened. And Jalen Hurts couldn't do anything passing without A.J. Brown.
I have a jar here, by the way, for the NFC least. Snake oil. That's what it was. Snake oil.
Like, I really wonder, Jalen Hurts. They can't do the tush push anymore if Jason Kelsey chooses to not come back, which apparently that was pre-reported. So now it's going to be up in the air if he is coming back or not. That'll be interesting to see at the very least. So once again, the media ruins yet another player retirement. Thanks, guys. But with that being said, what is Jalen Hurts going to look like next season when the book is a little bit more out on him? Because for all the talk that we want to say about the Eagles' defense and how poorly they've played on this streak, which, trust me, they played poorly. They look like they didn't want to tackle. It's like, what's his name? The former Jaguars quarterback, first-round pick from a couple years ago, C.J. Henderson, who's a quarterback, and he said he doesn't like tackling at all. You're playing the wrong position. Like, it seems like every single Philadelphia Eagle is playing the wrong position because in order to play defense, you have to tackle people. But for all we want to say about the Eagles' defense, what the heck did Jalen Hurts do? You know what a franchise quarterback would have actually done? He would have stopped the bleeding. A franchise quarterback would have forced a win in one of the games that they lost at the end of the regular season. Maybe not the Dallas game, but at least one of the other ones. At least the Giants game, when you were actually playing, because there was still something on the line. A franchise quarterback would have done a lot better without his top weapon. We have seen franchise quarterbacks make runs. Cam Newton made it to the Super Bowl with nobody as his wide receiver. Who did he have? Kelvin Benjamin was out, and even saying that he should have been the number one guy or something on that team. Devontae Smith is a pretty good wide receiver. He was there. Dallas Goedert was there. You're running back, like, for what you want to say about DeAndre Swift, they were there. No excuses for Jalen Hurts. I have not seen nearly enough. And when he goes to the post-game press conference, he might as well be saying my fellow Americans at the start of everything, because this dude somehow finds a way to wax poetic at every single press conference. Like, I did plenty of the ripping at the Cowboys earlier. This is the Eagles' time. Bums. Frauds. And Jalen Hurts, I'm saying this right now, and I normally put this in sports. I don't know what swept over me last season to just skip it. I'm always like, you need 2 or 3 seasons to prove that you're an elite quarterback. You're not an elite quarterback. An elite quarterback wins that game. An elite quarterback performs better at the end of the regular season. No, guys, do not give me this. There is no excuse that he performed that bad without AJ.
It's almost like you forget where he went to college, because when he came out, he was from Oklahoma. But when he went to college initially, he was a quarterback at Alabama. And so, therefore, that's even more stake going on.
I knew you were going to hit that.
Saying,
anyways,
I'm right about the whole thing.
Anyways,
Jalen Hurts is the problem here, though. I mean, he had 250 yards and a touchdown. He played well. The defense was
Justin. That is not good enough for who you paid $250 million to, and you know that.
Look, I expect them to win more towards the end of the season. Absolutely, they had chances to win their division. They were disappointing down the stretch, but let's go back to where they won where they were winning games, because Jalen Hurts was an excellent feather in their cap, but when they were winning games, it was because the run game was dominant. They were the best running team in the NFL, and the defense was shutting guys out. The secondary was horrendous this year. They went through all that stuff, and if you remember last year, all we could talk about, Darius Slay, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, James Bradbury. They were the best secondary in the NFL, and you could not stop them in the run game. And guess what? Those were the 2 things that disappeared down the stretch. As much as you want to blame Jalen Hurts, and he did have his mistakes, he's not infallible, they got away from what they do best. They were stifled at what they do best. DeAndre Swift had 34 rushing yards in this game. Baker Mayfield had 337 passing yards in this game. Cade Otton tore them up. Cade Otton led the team in receiving at 89 yards.
Better than Dallas Goedert.
They were spreading the ball everywhere, and they could not stop the bleeding. And guess what? When you can't stop the bleeding, as much as you want to say a quarterback wins these games, you need a defense. Defense is what wins championships, and that has not changed. I know offense is still the fancy thing, but let's face it. When you see a team go to the Super Bowl now, it's because they played, at the very least, middle of the pack defense.
To Justin's point, Tampa had a really good game plan, because Hassan Reddick had 1 tackle. The guy who had 11 sacks during the year, they matched up perfectly, because they also knew get the ball away from him, because Bradbury and Slay were not good this year. Maybe Gardner-Johnson was the key, but their
secondary was rough. They did lose a couple of guys going into this game in their secondary, but they were a bad defense this week. That's where it comes down to, because I got news for you. If it's a closer game, if it's 9-16 in the fourth quarter, and Jalen Hurts throws an interception and it blows the game, fine. You want to sit here and say he didn't deserve his money and he hasn't stepped up for this team, go for it. But the fact is, They got away from what they do best. They could not perform what they do best down the stretch in the entirety of the last 6 games. And I don't have all the stats in front of me. I wish that I came up with this, and had all this information beforehand. But the issue in my mind is not Jalen Hurts right now. Jalen Hurts was never, in my mind, the end all be all quarterback for this team and the reason they were winning games. They were winning games on defense. They had an excellent run game, which he helped tremendously because he is arguably the ultimate quarterback for a run-first offense, and at least in the league right now. And they stopped people. They stopped people left and right. They were a great run defense. They have a great defensive line. They had a great offensive line. They had a great secondary. That's what it was.
So all those things that underperformed this year, and you're right, they vastly underperformed in the last 7 games of the season. I'm saying regular season and playoff now.
Yeah.
We agree. Like, this is the thing. There's a difference between the issue that needs to be fixed and something that's an issue. Because teams don't always get to fix all their issues in one offseason. You're 100% right that the number one thing they need to fix is whatever happens to the defense. But what makes it – but do you know what is just one little problem with that? There's only one flaw. No, they should fix the defense. There's one issue when it comes to trying to fix a problem is that when you have another thing that now costs you $255 million for the next 5 years rather than something that was costing you $900K. Because now the rookie quarterback – now you don't have the rookie quarterback contract anymore.
Look, I understand that, and that's a major thing for teams building championship teams is that you want to have a quarterback being paid the least amount of money as possible. But guess what? Every team in the league has that issue. If you don't have a rookie quarterback, you're paying a ton of money. It's just the way things work now, and it's the same thing with the running back contracts. Should they be paid more? Absolutely. They are vital to their teams. That being said, the market is stifled for whatever reason right now. They're not making money. Teams have proven that if you don't pay a running back, you could put in other stuff and you could supplement that with a great offensive line and a middle of the pack running back.
Let's be real. They're not paying the running back so they could just give more of that money to the quarterback, especially if their quarterback can do both of those things. Exactly. The problem is that when I pay my quarterback $250 million, I expect him to play like a $250 million quarterback. And if you look at the final score alone, well, yes, they underperformed that entire game. At one point, that game was 16-9. What were the Eagles doing? That offense didn't do anything.
Didn't I also call that the Buccaneers would run away with this game in the second half?
They did. Yeah. They really did.
So call back on an old joke. Let's say you have a $250 million cake that you get from your neighbor.
You're never letting this go.
Well, no. Seeing as how I won on Super Bowl show, I will have a cake and I will eat it in front of you.
I want to know why my neighbor in my poor-ass neighborhood can afford a $250 million cake. Well, why are they living next to me?
Because Nick Sirianni is selling you a vat of steak oil, basically. Look, here's the bottom line. Something went wrong with this Eagles team. Whether it was Hurts underperforming, whether it was their offense got too predictable, whether it was the fact that the defense shut down because they made the move from going away from Sean Desai to Matt Patricia for some ungodly reason. Why he's on a sideline for a football game? This is Pee-wee football. I have no idea.
They had like one bad game, and then they went to Patricia, and their defense fell apart.
Yeah.
I need to figure out who was it. Sirianni who put Patricia there, or was it Roseman? Because whoever
Sirianni.
Okay, so maybe Sirianni needs to be fired because you.
You know what? Too.
That is unforgivable.
You know what? Too. The antics work when you're winning games, but if you're still the same jerk that you've always been, and you're not winning games in a town like Philadelphia, it's not going to work.
Well, also just in general, when you're winning, the things that you're doing, the things that you're preaching are different. The Patriot Way was really nice when they were winning with Brady. No one gave a damn about the Patriot Way in the last 3 years when they did nothing.
Well, yeah, I mean, Mac Jones doesn't know the Patriot Way from his own armpit anyways, but, that's not here or there. Look, we can talk about the Eagles all we want to because, I would probably will in the offseason because, God forgive me, this team is not going to be a contender next season for the Super Bowl with those constructed. They need to get better in a hurry. Let's flip the script a little bit between now and then. I know. Flip the script a little bit here. Baker Mayfield looked like the guy that was drafted number 1 overall.
Yep.
Finally. He looked like that guy. And this Tampa Bay offense looked to be humming on all cylinders. And you're right. Even though Mike Evans wasn't really a feature guy, the fact of the matter is he was still a guy that was there that drew a lot of attention, which is why Kate Otten had 8 catches, which is why the undercard of David Moore and Trey Palmer had those catches for touchdowns.
Let me just interject here real quick. This game could have been a lot worse. There were a lot of drops by Tampa Bay.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Mike Evans in the first quarter dropped like a short touchdown, just straight up dropped it for like a 50-yard touchdown. And he was not the only one. There were a lot of drops in this game by Tampa Bay. It could have been way worse than it was.
There absolutely were. And the defense that we've talked about as maybe a sticking point for them, call it what you will. They got away with a face mask. So be it.
That wouldn't have made a difference. They were winning right
now. No, but still. But you could also just feel the trajectory of the game kind of shift. Because you're right. It was 16-9. If they get that, it's 16-11. And maybe that turns the momentum around. But once that was stopped, you could see the Eagles fans saying, that's our one play. And we've got nothing else. They stopped it. Like, yeah, again, face mask be damned. It was stopped. And after that, it was all Tampa the rest of the way. Jamel Dean had a phenomenal game. Kalijah Kancey.
Anton Winfield Jr.
Winfield Jr., who deserves to go to the Pro Bowl. Kalijah Kancey, who deserves to be a high draft pick and was, even though he shot the boards late. Vita Vea, even though he didn't have the stats, was a nuisance most of this game. They cooked up blitzes left and right. They showed you why when Todd Bowles was the head coach of the Jets and they went 10-6, that last game be damned, he was a good coach for them. And that team was really good because Bowles knew what to do. He threw out schemes that they were never seen before. The Eagles didn't know what to do. So if that's the effort that Tampa Bay has, and again, you're talking about a team that won their division by going 9-8 and has nothing to lose. They lose the game, so what? You made it out of your division. You beat the defending NFC champions. Whatever.
Todd Bowles has bought himself, three more years in Tampa?
The loosest teams that play in this playoff are the most dangerous. Houston and Tampa Bay, to me, are the most dangerous teams because they have no reason. They're playing with house money. They're not playing with any stress. No stress at all.
Well, look, when you think about it, out of all of the teams that have played in the playoffs this year, I'm trying to figure out how to word this. Which teams have the most championship experience? And as bad as they were, and not even to say they were bad, they were 9-8. They had some disappointing losses, but for as bad as we thought they were, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are one of the most loaded teams in terms of guys who have been there before, guys who have won. I mean, they still have a lot of the core that was there when they won that Tom Brady Super Bowl. They have that core than the Rams do.
The head coach is the guy who was the DC that schemed up one of the best 4-game stretches of defensive. Like, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers won that run because of that defense. You could have handpicked one of 11 starters on that defense to win the Super Bowl MVP at any point in those 4 games. If there was an NFL playoff MVP, it would have gone to a defensive player on Tampa, not an offensive player. That defense won them that run.
And it also just kind of goes to show that when you talk about these teams that are higher seeds that have won 11, 12, 13 games in the regular season versus a Green Bay or a Tampa Bay that win 9 games, that both teams get in the playoffs in the very last week, what's more important? The team that bulldozes everybody, like Miami did, but then loses their way towards the end of the year, or even Philadelphia loses their way towards the end of the year, but still finishes 11-6, but no way, shape, or form they're going to be competing. Or a team that's 9-8 or Houston 10-7 that gets in by the skin of their teeth and plays this loose kind of football that they're having fun and they're winning games they shouldn't be winning. And because of that, those 3 teams are in the last 8.
And what did we say in the first month of the season about the Buccaneers team? And this is not a joke. This wasn't a joke take. When this team is playing with confidence and with vibes, they were rolling to start the year. They were
2-0 when they ran into that Eagles team.
Yeah. I thought it was 3-0.
No, they played in week 3.
Oh, okay. But that being said, like this Tampa Bay team, we talked about it. We're about to talk about the divisional games here in a brief moment. They're dangerous, and like Rick said, I think they be the ones that have a date with San Francisco, or will we see a Tampa Bay home game in the NFC Championship? I mean, you never know at this point. These playoffs are kind of crazy. But no, like to your point, Rick, I think it could be either or because we've seen dominant teams steamroll the postseason as well and come into it. Which I saved the stat here. I actually saved the stat this time when we talk about the divisional round here about how number one seeds have been doing in the postseason for the last. It went back to 2014, so 10 years. But number one seeds are not as outmatched as we think. Higher seeds in general, but this is a Tampa Bay team. Like we said, when you have nothing to lose, it's great. And look, Tampa Bay is going into this offseason with house money. It's going to be great for them. They get to enjoy this offseason. And as long as they do not pay their quarterback $250 million, that team is going to be good as well next season for sure. So that being said, do we need to say anything about the Cowboys here? I mean, we kind of already spoke about them earlier in the episode.
There's no reason.
I want to say they did, because we were talking about it earlier on top receiving seasons. Arguably, CeeDee Lamb had a better season than Tyreek. He had 15 more catches. They were within 50 yards of each other.
Yeah.
One less touchdown, but two more rushing touchdowns. He was top 10 in every major category, and they still could not find a way to capitalize on a Green Bay team that, albeit very hot, playing very well right now, but this was
they still should have won.
This is a major disappointment.
And I think the bigger disappointment for Cowboys fans is that they're keeping McCarthy.
No, that's definitely the loss. But I understand why you'd be disappointed about keeping McCarthy. But to lose to the 7 seed and not be in the game at all at any point in your own home stadium.
Right. Let me rephrase it.
With the offense that they had and just looking that poor. I mean,
let me rephrase it. Final nail in the coffin on this season.
There you go.
Is the fact that you're keeping McCarthy.
Like I'll say it like this: Dallas has had in their run some good head coaches that just haven't worked out in Dallas.
Yeah, Mike
they haven't gotten them to. Well, no, he's a decent head coach.
Yeah,
he's a head coach, not in Dallas. Like you put him somewhere else, he probably is a 4-time championship game participant. But with Dallas, they're snake bit.
Well, when he also has the quarterback as well, because I think it's safe to say Dak Prescott is a certain tier of quarterback in this league. He's not tier 1.
Not to CeeDee Lamb's mama.
Mrs.
Lamb says no, thank you.
You know, the Cowboys fans might be disagreeing with her, but with that take, it's the gift. Why are you booing? You know I'm right. Like you can try to deny it as much as you want.
Exactly,
it's 100% right. And man, oh man, that is just the NFC least. Jesus. So that being said, let's move on to the winners because we should actually probably give them a little bit of airtime here. Then again, we're going to review these games next week as well, so that'll be something to say the least. It'll be less games though, so it'll be better for us. Guys, let's run through this. Let's go back to the AFC actually. The first game of this weekend. Actually, no, hold on. Excuse me. Let me read off the stat that I found for context as we are going into our analysis and also our picks. So, I got this from TSN official here, so shout out to them. 65% of the number one seeds have made the Super Bowl in the last 10 years in the NFL. So going back to 2014, of the 10 Super Bowl matchups that we've had since then, I think all but 2 had at least number 1 seed in them. That would be the Super Bowl between the Rams and the Patriots. They were both the 2nd seed. And also the Super Bowl from 2 years ago, the first ever Super Bowl we got to do a podcast. We talked about on the show. It was the Bengals and the Rams Super Bowl. Both of those teams, ironically, were the 4th seeds.
Yeah.
And both of them, to this point, they are tied for the 2nd lowest seed to ever advance because the lowest seed that has ever advanced all the way to the Super Bowl in the last 10 years came the year before, when it was the Tampa Bay 5th seeded Buccaneers going to face the 1st seed Kansas City Chiefs. And one thing I would like to say, because this goes back just to 2014, from 2014 to now, in this 10-year stretch, 4 of the first 5 Super Bowls in this stretch were all 1 versus 1 matchups. That was Broncos Seahawks, Patriots Seahawks, Panthers Broncos. You have to skip a year because the Falcons were the 2nd seed in 2017. Trying to figure out who the 1st seed was that year. And then 2018 was the Patriots and the Eagles. So, and last year it was the number 1s, the Chiefs and the Eagles. So a good amount of success for number 1 seeds. Again, just for context as we start to begin our analysis and then eventually our predictions here on the show when it comes to us talking the number 1 seeds, which, by the way, first game we're talking about on the AFC, first game of this weekend. Why is it the first game? Texans versus Ravens in Baltimore, boys. Should be an interesting one, to say the very least. You're going to get a lot of back and forth. I think CJ Stroud can go throw for throw with Lamar Jackson. Even if Lamar might win the MVP award at this point, which what a sneaky MVP award he might get here. This is going to be quite the entertaining game. The Texans defense, I think the biggest challenge for them, it's not even going to be necessarily the receiving of the Ravens. I think it's actually going to be the rushing attack that the Ravens can do, because the thing with the Ravens this year is that they were a lot better being diverse with not just Lamar being the only running option that they have, because the Ravens running backs, well, not all of them went to the emergency room this year, so there's victory there. I think that actually, to me, the biggest test for the Texans defense,
Just 2.
Yeah, I mean that's actually better compared to some of the last seasons. Let's be fully honest here. But if we're being serious here for a moment, I think the biggest test. This is my analysis. I think the X factor will be, can the Texans' rushing defense show up in this game? I think the teams are going to go pass for pass. I think the Ravens' defense is very fine. They might finally bother Stroud here a little bit, and I think Lamar and those weapons are good, but they're not overwhelming receiving wise. I think the Ravens' rushing attack and how the Texans do against that is my personal X factor going into this game. That's just my opinion. Rick, if you have something you want to say before you talk about this game, I know you. This is this first point does not have to do with the game, and then you're going to talk about it. So
yes.
You first.
You know who was the number 1 seed that season that Atlanta went to the Super Bowl?
Wait, give me one guess. I will say, because it wasn't. Oh, Cowboys.
Yes, the Cowboys. and for further context, who did they lose to?
The Packers.
Mike McCarthy's Packers. They lost to the Packers.
More Aaron Rodgers Packers, but yes. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Look, I think this Ravens Texans game is so fascinating because I'm interested to see if the Ravens go with a 2 tight end set on offense. Because Mark Andrews is back, but let's not discount Isaiah Likely, who has been an absolute stud in the second half of the season with Andrews being out. I know that Andrews is, I think, practically. I don't know if he's fully back yet, but I thought I saw he would be cleared to go for this game.
Actually, as of 24 hours ago, according to Jameson Hensley, Ravens tight end Andrews will not be playing in this game.
Okay, so I think it was one of those, he was trying to get back into this game, but he couldn't.
Practiced in full this week, but they said they're giving him.
They said no, which I guess makes sense because I think it's the biggest spread, right? It's 9.5. Or it's the biggest spread of the AFC games. Yeah. Again, I heard this question come up when I was listening to sports radio, and it's, what concerns you more about this game? The Texans' lack of playoff experience or the Ravens' 3 weeks of Lamar Jackson resting? What's more concerning of the two? The Texans are going to come in here without really any, look, like as we were saying, they got here. They won a game. Now they're on the road against the Ravens, who went 13-4, had the best record of any team in this league. How loose will the Texans be, and how will the Ravens respond to that? That's my X factor. What kind of things can DeMeco Ryans cook up in the very early part of this game to get the Ravens uncomfortable, to make the murmurs at M&T Bank Stadium kind of grow a little bit in the first quarter? If this first quarter isn't 14-3 Ravens, or 14-0 Ravens, or even 10-0 Ravens, if it's a close first quarter, I think that favors the Texans. Because I think, again, they're a team that's playing with house money. They have nothing to lose in this game. They weren't supposed to be here, or they're here. The Ravens, you have the presumed MVP quarterback in Lamar Jackson. But the last time that they had 3 weeks of rest, they came out flat in that playoff game. I think they lost that playoff game prior.
Yeah, they did.
So, will history repeat itself? Because the Texans don't care, man. I think the first quarter is going to be really telling. If Lions cooks up really good schemes and gets the Ravens off kilter, it's going to be an interesting dogfight to the end.
I also think it could be the case, Rick, of what if at the second half it's 17-14 Texans? The Ravens haven't had to do a lot of comebacks this season. And the few times that it's been that close going into the second half, they haven't fared well. I think the joke with them is the fact that I think all their losses this year are just the AFC North. But it's just the fact that the one to the Colts, and then the rest is to the AFC.
Who, by the way, should be in the AFC North. That's another conversation for another day.
Well, offseason,
Whoa.
offseason. But anyways, like this is one of those things to consider of, if this is a close game, can Baltimore win? Because we haven't really had to see them come back this season. Like a lot of their wins have been, as we've spoken about, like just them handling business. So I think that'll be interesting to say the very least. But Justin, your takes on this? Well,
It's
Ricky,
also a week 1 rematch, but again, look how far CJ Stroud's come from week 1.
Completely different teams now.
Completely different teams. Both of them completely different.
Oh, yeah.
Because especially Houston. But let's be real here. Also, this was like that was game 1 of Todd Monken. Like, remember, this is his first season as the offensive coordinator here. Like, this is a different Ravens team, just schematically, even from years before.
And did they lose Dobbins in that game too?
Yes.
Or is that week 2?
Every year, week 1.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Sammy Watkins plays well week 1. Dobbins gets hurt week 1. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Shame. He's so good on the field.
Yeah.
I hope he has a clean bill of health on his next team.
I hope. Of course, but you never root for anyone to get injured. But anyways, my X factor in this is going to be defensive scheme, because it's really going to come down to who can slow down the opposing quarterback. It really is, in my mind, Lamar versus CJ Stroud. And I do give the Ravens a slight edge because of that defense, but let's face it. I mean, they could score on just about anyone. They've proven that they could score on just about anyone. The Texans and CJ Stroud and those receivers, and there's only so many guys you can cover, because let's face it, if you're going to cover up Nico Collins in this game, it's not like they don't have Noah Brown and Robert Woods and Dalton Schultz and Brevin Jordan and all these guys that can go out long and catch a big score. I'm surprised at the spread, to be honest. With a 3-week absence like this, like you guys said, I think that as important as it was for them to get healthy, I'm worried about so much time off for some of these guys, especially the younger guys. So it's going to be interesting to see. And you're right, Rick. I mean, the Ravens are the ones that have all of this pressure. If they have another first round out this year, I mean, I understand they were the best team in the NFL this year. A first round out just demolishes the belief in your organization. I mean, you finally paid Lamar. He got what he deserved. How many playoff wins does he have? 1?
Yeah.
Is he another Dak Prescott? Is he another Tony Romo? I mean, when was the last time John Harbaugh won a playoff game?
I was about to say, John Harbaugh is the guy that doesn't get talked about.
Mike Tomlin.
This dude,
John Harbaugh has been there for forever as well. And I know he's got a Super Bowl win. I know he is a good coach. And again, you'd be hard-pressed to find another coach that is a better coach in the NFL. That being said,
Jim,
when does it get stale? At what point? And especially now, as a 13-4 MVP leading top team, number 1 seed in the NFL, if you're going to come in and you're going to lose to a rookie quarterback who made the playoffs in the last week of the year, and again, it's not even that I would blame them, because the Texans are just on that kind of run right now, but like, this would be a franchise-altering loss in my mind. If it's a close game, maybe not as much. But if they have what happened last week with the Browns and the Texans, if they come out and they just absolutely light them up, there's going to be some noise made in the NFC North. I mean, the AFC North. I really think that's the case, because look, there's a lot of guys that have been there for a long time without a lot of recent success. And the NFL is a what have you done for me lately league.
The last 2 times, by the way, the Ravens won their division. Not even won 1 seed, won their division. They lost their first playoff game. In 2018, they lost to the Chargers.
That was rookie Lamar, yeah.
And in 2019, with Lamar's MVP season and then the number 1 overall seed,
lost to the Titans.
28-12 to the Titans.
And look, I'm going to root for the Ravens. I don't want to see them fail in this fashion. I like Lamar. I like Harbaugh. I like the Ravens as a franchise. Not that I say I want the Texans to lose, but I think they deserve more than to be this kind of like fraud alert kind of team.
My guy Chris was telling me yesterday already, to him, CJ Stroud is a top 10 quarterback in the league. Fair. If the Texans beat the Ravens, we're talking about CJ Stroud top 5?
Top 6.
No.
Top 6?
Top 6.
I don't know. We'll do a quarterback ranking at some point. I don't know if I'm putting.
That's one of our hallmarks, anyways.
I mean, I'm certainly not putting Tua where I put him last year.
Definitely not.
Yeah, it was
I-
18th, and y'all hated me for it.
I have my book. I have my
That
book
was
somewhere.
his-
There's some
I
guys
looked
there.
like a genius, man. He was lighting it up, and
Yeah.
then he just came back down to it.
Yeah, no, we both have a former Alabama quarterback we're putting down in our rankings, Justin, because that guy that lost to Tampa ain't going to be as high for me.
Maybe 2 with Jalen Hurts.
I was referring to anyway. Yeah, okay, thanks, Rick.
2
Moving on to the other AFC team as we trample over our bits here. Chiefs Bills. Man, this seems familiar. Along with the fact that the Buffalo Bills are serving Taylor Swift themed food for this playoff game here, which I actually have it. No, yes, I have it in front of me. So listen to this. You have the Bad Blood waffle fries. It is a 2-foot display of spiced waffle fries featuring each city's culinary specialty, topped half with buffalo chicken and blue cheese and half with Kansas City cattleman's barbecue pork, coleslaw, and bread and butter pickles.
They're catering to the other team's fans right now.
They're catering to the Swifties.
I know the joke.
I don't care.
I know what Justin's. No, I'm with Justin here, but also here's my biggest issue.
Yeah.
I know the joke is because she has the song called Bad Blood. I think you'll have to get a blood test after taking those fries. There's no way you're healthy after taking those.
So you get hypothetical
theme. They have a Kansas City themed. They're calling it Taylor Swift, but it's a Kansas City themed food.
It's half KC, half Buffalo.
So you get hypothermia against Miami, and you're gonna get a heart attack against Buffalo.
Yeah,
that's a losing mentality in my mind in terms of. I mean, I got news for you. Even if I'm a Kansas City fan traveling, if you think that like I'm upset because they didn't cater to my food I'm in Buffalo. Buffalo is actually known for some of their food.
They have good food.
But this is the Pagulas we're talking about, man.
Well, I mean, this could just be the arena doing this. Like, they may not have nothing to do.
They own the arena. I'm sure they
approved of it. It's a loser move to cater to the other team's fans in a playoff game.
They're doing
them over here.
They're doing it for memes as well. It just and the second one, it is a Karma quesadilla. Does she have a song or an album?
Karma is the guy. Well, in Brazil, yeah, she did. Karma is the guy on the Chiefs because he was there.
Oh, okay.
And it was like this big thing, but yeah, she has a song called Karma. Yes.
And then the Karma quesadilla is chicken tenders, bacon, cilantro ranch in a triple stacked quesadilla topped with a pork belly chaser.
That sounds delicious, but I'm not catering to Kansas City.
I try to lose weight, and this just put on 10 pounds just hearing about that triple stack quesadilla.
I want one now.
You guys want to make the trip up to Buffalo just so we could take the food then come back?
No, it's supposed to snow again, man.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
20 degrees here, and I don't want to leave my apartment. I think I'm driving to Buffalo now. We wouldn't even. We probably would make the game.
So here's my thing about.
I think the game is Sunday, Justin. We'll make the game
tomorrow. I was thinking.
Here's my thing about this game, though. Of the 4 playoff games that are this week, this is, I think, my least entertaining one because I like matchups that are different. Okay. And I've just seen this one so many times, over and over and over again. It's like when you have a playlist of Disney songs, you play it over and over and over again. The 3-month-old loves it. The 32-year-old hates it after 5 plays.
Hold on, but this has been the most entertaining playoff matchup we've seen.
I was going to say the last time these two teams faced off went to overtime. Like, come on, Rick.
Lance and Romo, though, come on.
Look, you can hate the commentators, but
to ruin this game for you. Come on.
Look, okay. So
watch the game on mute for all we care. Just watch the game, dude.
Fine, it's not on Peacock. I'll watch the game. But here's the thing. So Buffalo seems to have righted this. So I'll give my X factor immediately. It's whoever wins the running game, because James Cook has actually become a solid running back for the Bills, which they've lacked. And even though Isaiah Pacheco's been very good for Kansas City, like there's been games where he's kind of been out of the way, and the Chiefs have kind of struggled in that regard. So if Buffalo can stop Kansas City's rushing attack, they're going to have a pretty decent game. Whilst James Cook needs to go over 100 yards rushing, I think, for the Bills to have any real chance. They don't have Gabe Davis.
Yeah.
And who else? They're missing one other person. Someone on the defense, I think they're missing.
Yeah, one of their defensive fill-ins.
So, you need to capitalize on the fact that you have a 2-tier tight end attack with Knox and Kincaid plus James Cook. You gotta win in the trenches if you're Buffalo to really win this game, and possibly, depending on how the other game shakes out, host the AFC title game. Possibly.
Yeah. And I'll say this real quick. My X factor, you mentioned the running games. I think that's definitely a big thing. I also think the defense is, because you have this Buffalo team that, by hook or by crook, the defense the last couple weeks, even with all these injuries, has showed up when it mattered. They held the Dolphins in that final game to get the second seed, and then they held off the Steelers relatively well. I think the Steelers, a lot of the Steelers offense was just garbage time at the end, basically, when the Bills knew that they could have won or were going to win relatively comfortably. I think they just took their foot off the gas. Whichever defense, to me, is able to get more stops, maybe a pick. We've seen a lot of pick sixes in this playoff, but maybe an interception, a fumble recovery, something like that is going to make the difference. Whoever can, end a critical second half drive first between these two defenses, I think that's going to end up being whoever wins. But I have one more thing about this game, but I'm going to save that when we officially make our predictions, because to me, this game, there's one tagline to describe this game for me on who I'm going to pick to win, but I'll save that for later. Justin, your thoughts?
I hope I don't ruin it here. Is this Mahomes' first road playoff game?
That is not my tagline, but yes, it is.
It is his first road playoff game.
I think that's a major factor. He's used to playing in the weather. I don't think that Buffalo itself, like the weather and the factors like that, will affect him, but it's going to be a different view for him playing in a new stadium, not a new stadium, but a different stadium in the playoffs.
In the AFC, because Super Bowl is neutral. So
exactly. So it's going to be interesting to see how he reacts to that. Buffalo is always loud, and their fans are rowdy. So it'll have some sort of effect. But the question here is, does Josh Allen finally get over that hump and beat Kansas City in the playoffs? Because that's a major, major thing in his career. And is Kansas City still the team that we know and think that they have been in the last 6 years? Are they still the top team in the AFC? We have not seen Mahomes lose in a round before the AFC Championship game. This is a major one. And this is probably, in my mind, the closest game out of the four. I'm not sure exactly who I want to pick at this point. Buffalo is on a hot streak. They've come back into form, so to speak, to be the team that we know they could be. They have not statistically played that way, but they're winning in fashion that are not the most convincing, but they're winning. They're doing the job. They're getting the job done. They're winning ugly, and they're winning tough-fought games.
Yep.
So I'm not sure which way I'm going to go, and when we do our picks, it'll be interesting, but this is a game to me that is the most exciting. There's a reason it's Sunday at 6:30. This is the game of the week.
Yeah. It's very much deserving to be the final game of this divisional round weekend for sure, especially with this matchup. Again, I guess Rick was sick of all the Brady-Manning matchups because he doesn't like repeats. So, but I'm not going to say no to another Mahomes-Allen matchup personally.
Did you know this is the first playoffs since 1998 not
without either of them?
Brady or Manning?
That's wild.
Yeah, insane.
Oh, man.
That person can drink.
So we talked about the bookend games of the weekend, the first game and the last game. Let's talk about the two middle games here, both in the NFC. Boys, 49ers, Packers is the first one, is the second game of the Saturday nightcap tonight, by the way. 8:15 start. This, I think a day or two ago, both this and the Ravens game were at 9.5 spreads, but now it has increased to 10 now for San Francisco. They are favored over the Packers. Look, I'll keep this brief and honest. I love the fact, I'm 50-50 on the fact that the Packers beat the Cowboys, because yes, we get to laugh at the memes of the Cowboys, but my Jordan Love take is officially dead that I've had for the last 4 years. That being said, look, I know the Packers are Cinderella team. They beat the Cowboys. Jordan Love's looking good, this, that, and third. We talked about a couple teams here where it's no excuse. You're the San Francisco 49ers. There's no excuse. You need to assert dominance, and you need to show the fact that you've earned the number one seed. I didn't make this joke when we talk about the Ravens, but I'll make this joke when we talk about the 49ers. Your color is in the Super Bowl logo, for the love of everything. Win the game. But in all seriousness, if you're San Francisco, you're the number one seed. You rough-shotted Dallas this season. You rough-shotted Philadelphia this season. Yes, you had the rough stretch of time, which, by the way, also coincided with your starting quarterback having a concussion.
When some of their best players being out, too. Yeah. Kittle, Debo, they were all...
Exactly. You are the top team in the NFL. You are the top team in the NFL. Let's be real. Even with the Ravens beating them in the regular season, this is the team. This is the premier organization in this league. This is the team that has run the NFC the last 2 seasons. Or you could argue it in terms of a combination of record and the deep playoff success. And they will feel very justified if they make it to the Super Bowl this year with what happened in the NFC title game last year. But irregardless, you need to establish dominance. There's no excuse to drop this game. I'm saying that right now for San Fran. There's no excuse to drop this game. McCaffrey needs to do his thing. Your defense needs to overwhelm the offensive line of the Packers. They need to do their job. Simple as that. I think that's the simplest way to describe San Francisco here. We can entertain the Packers as much as we want, and I'm not saying we shouldn't discuss them, but my analysis on San Francisco is you need to do and be the team that we have seen for the last 4 months, which is the best team in the NFC.
Yeah. Look, Jordan Love this season is 1-6 when he throws one interception or more. The 49ers have picked off 22 passes this season, including Fred Warner, the linebacker, who's got 4 INTs. So if I'm Green Bay, I do whatever I can to protect Jordan Love. And if I'm Jordan Love, I look for the right passes to make. I don't rush anything, because if the Niners defense plays up to their potential, and if they pick him off once or twice, or even defend passes, they have 84 passes defended this season as a defensive unit. If they make it hard for Jordan Love to move the ball around, doesn't matter how many yards Aaron Jones can go for, it's not going to work. So Green Bay has to take care of the ball if they want any chance to win this game. But you're right. San Fran, you got to show us why you're the 1 seed, man.
If Green Bay can somehow pull off the upset, I'm giving full credit to the offensive line, because this is a better pass rush than what they faced in Dallas. I know Micah Parsons is a guy that, what was it that they were saying? Micah Parsons didn't get a single hold call all season. He got 2 in that game against the Packers.
Yep.
If you look at the rest of that Cowboys defensive line, a lot of underwhelming factors a part of them this season, including DeMarcus Lawrence, who just really was a non-factor throughout the entire year. This Niners team is not that. And if the Packers can make this upset, the offensive line of Green Bay deserves all the credit in the world.
And also one last thing, too. This is an offensive line that doesn't have David Bakhtiari on it. So no Rodgers, no Bakhtiari, 1 win away from the NFC title game.
Also, no Bakhtiari against the Niners in the past. They've lost those games.
True.
I'm going to get a little controversial here.
Yes.
I rode the Niners all year long. They were my team going in. And they should be favored to win this game by a lot. There is not a team that was in the playoffs in the NFC that I think has a better shot to beat the 49ers today. And that may only be for the fact that there is not a team firing on all cylinders the way that the Packers have the last 2 weeks. They've just been fantastic. They've done everything that they've wanted. They've imposed their will. They've played complete games against, I guess one playoff team, but they've played well, and they've played well when they needed to. This is a chance for Jordan Love to make a statement in the NFL. If Jordan Love comes out and they win in any fashion against this Niners team, we're having a different conversation about Jordan Love next year. We're having a different conversation about the Green Bay Packers next year. We might be even having a different conversation about Aaron Rodgers next year, if that's the case. The Packers have the chance to do something that they have not done in over a decade, and that is make real noise in an NFC playoff game. Because let's face it, the bugaboo for the Packers in Aaron Rodgers' tenure was the San Francisco 49ers. And there has not been a San Francisco 49ers team that is this complete.
Yeah.
Maybe the Super Bowl year, but even still, they didn't dominate the way that they are dominating right now in the NFL.
I would argue that because that Super Bowl appearance team, they only passed the ball 8 times in the NFC title game. That's pretty good, dude.
They are a dominant team, though, this year. And for however many weeks they've had off now, they're coming in and they're having to defend their home against a white-hot Green Bay Packers team. For real. They are firing on all cylinders. Jordan Love has the chance, I don't know if he's got the ability, we'll find out, has the chance to really, really turn some heads this week. And there's nothing in his past performances that tells me he's not going to. This is a great 49ers team. And if they do start picking him off and forcing turnovers, it could be a long day for the kid, but just think of it now. This is going to be, I think, a closer game than people think. I don't think it's going to get out of hand. It might come down to the fourth quarter, and we'll see who has the ball in their hands in the last drive of the game. But I think this is going to be a much closer game than people think. And I'm not saying I'm picking them. I'm just saying don't be surprised if the Packers let you know that they are here right now.
Justin, if you were betting on either of these games, would you go with either of these lower seeds to cover, do you think? Because the spreads are pretty high.
So I'm terrible at betting on spreads, just awful. So I don't know if my opinion will matter so much. I would say I would pick the Packers to cover. 9.5 is high. I might pick the Texans to cover as well, but I think that one has a chance of being like a touchdown game as opposed to this one might come down to a field goal.
Yeah.
And again, not because the Packers are a better team. They're just so on fire right now. And sure, it's possible it comes to an end. I've been wrong before. I was wrong last week. I'm sure I'll be wrong about something this week. But, I mean, the way that they absolutely dominated the Cowboys, makes me think if they can do anything against this team, we're in for a very good game tonight. So we'll see. I think if I had to bet a spread, I would probably take the Packers -10. But I don't generally bet on spreads. I'm terrible at that. I'd rather do a parlay of outright wins than a spread.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah, I'm not giving my take there because I don't bet at all. So last game for us to talk about before we get to our predictions: Lions Buccaneers. We've had a little bit of discourse of this game throughout it. It's like Rick said. I think that these aren't elite defenses in all these games that we're talking about. Like, not all of the 8 remaining teams have elite defenses. You know, there's some good ones in there, like San Francisco, of course, top tier. Kansas City has been top tier. Baltimore, top tier. Then you have Houston, who's pretty good, like, what, top 12 they finished the season, I think?
Yeah, they're all upper echelon defenses. I mean, I wouldn't say that they're elite. I'm not going to compare the Bucks defense to the Niners, but, like, they're pretty good defenses.
Yeah.
Relatively fine defenses, but it's going to be in this Buccaneers-Lions game who is going to be able to stifle the other team, because we saw it got a little bit scary for Detroit in that Rams game when it came to, their offense slowing down in the second half. And is that going to be the case? Are they even going to get off to a slow start, maybe, potentially? I think you need to have that question. Then for the Lions, they did a good job at limiting things in the red zone. Again, you got to give them credit. Against Sean McVay, it's not easy to hold that guy in the red zone and stop them from getting touchdowns consistently, but they were able to do that. Whereas the long ball was the struggle for Detroit in that Rams game. And you got Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and Cade Otton? Yes. Cade Otton. You have those three who, like, the Buccaneers are liable to go off for a big game. So I think big play, excuse me. So I think the ultimate difference maker will be which defense is able to do their thing here. And I know that might sound obvious, but I think you need to boil it down to can the Lions, despite walking into this with what we said earlier, a bad matchup on paper, do their job, and can they hold things from this becoming a deep ball fest? Because if there's one thing Baker Mayfield has done throughout his career, he likes a sling in it. It doesn't matter where he's been. That dude is willing to throw a dart 30, 35, 40 down the field if he thinks it's there. You got to cover the deep ball if you're Detroit. That, to me, is the number one thing in this one. If Baker's slinging it all night long, I think Tampa Bay is getting the second win here for the good old NFC South in these playoffs. So,
my X factor, and I know it's dome, which is funny because our reporter asked Todd Bowles how do you think the weather's going to be in Detroit. It's like, we're playing in a dome, you know that, right? It's the kicking game, because Chase McLaughlin has been lethal this season. I think it's 29 of 31 in his field goal attempts. And you're playing in a dome with good weather, good conditions, so it's perfect conditions. Michael Badgley, although his numbers are deceiving, he's only played in 4 games. And again, this is the guy who lifetime is 5 of 13 from beyond 50 yards in his career. So fourth down offense in this game on the opposite side of the ball could look very different for both teams. Tampa could be okay going for that long field goal attempt because McLaughlin's been so good this year. Detroit, they might be a little more hesitant, and you could see them go for it on fourth down or try a short coffin corner punt from Jack Fox, and that's a giveaway. So I think whichever team can control fourth downs, and if Tampa Bay is able to put a little more points on the board through a kicking game here or there, I think that's going to serve them very well in this game. I really do. And like I said, if the Lions put up another 425 yards of giveaway on offense to the other team, it's going to be rough. It's going to be a very rough game for them.
I think that it's going to come down a lot to the defensive line. It's going to be which team can put the most hits on the quarterback. It was a factor last week in both games. It was, believe it or not, it was part of the reason that the game was so close in the first half was the Eagles kept getting to Baker Mayfield in times where they needed to make a play. And as good as the pieces are on both offensive lines, there's holes that these excellent defenders are going to get through. I mean, both teams have serious pass rush, and I expect it to be the major factor in this game. So we're going to see what it comes down to. I think the team that gets sacked the most is probably the team that ends up losing this game. And it's as simple as that. I don't really think it's going to be more than that. I mean, both teams are going to make plays. Both teams are going to make plays on defense, but it's the quarterback that has the most opportunity, the most time to throw, and the most chance to make a play that's going to lead their team to victory. And we'll get to our picks.
And before anyone says that might be basic from Justin, need I remind you, Joe Burrow won a playoff game against the number 1 seed, getting sacked 9 times. So it can happen. You can win despite your ground.
It sure can happen.
It can happen with your back being on the ground half the time.
Yep.
So that being said, let's go to our divisional picks. Do you guys want to do this in game order or like that we just discussed, or game order of the schedule?
Whatever.
Let's do game order that we discussed.
Thank you. I give democracy, and they just throw it like, yeah, whatever you want. Like, okay, I'm trying not to be a dictator here. Okay. Games that we discussed.
I cede all of my power to you, Jared. You've never led us wrong before. Rick's going to say something now.
That's a complete lie. I'll say something. Anyways, we'll go game order we discussed. So Texans, Ravens will be the first one. I'll begin the proceedings. Baltimore, there's no excuse. You got to get this one. So I will pick the Baltimore Ravens to win this game. Who wants to go next? I'm not going to force this part. Whoever wants to go next can go.
I think Baltimore wins this one, too. It's going to be a close game. I expect it to be a good game, but you're right. They need to pull this out. The Texans are a hot team. I expect it to be close, but Lamar's got to prove why he got paid all that money.
I mean, give me Houston. Because I think you're right. I think there's so much pressure on the Ravens that if they wilt, and the Texans are just so run and gun and so like roll off the shoulder, they're going to run away with this one. I mean, it'll be close at the end, but I think if they make it uncomfortable, give me Houston. Give me Houston to go to the AFC title game.
Okay. All right. Bills Chiefs. Now, I said I had a tagline for this game. This is my tagline. If not now, then when?
That's true.
If you're the Buffalo Bills, Joe Burrow didn't make it to the postseason this year. This is the worst Chiefs team that has been around in the Mahomes, Reed, and Kelsey era. We're talking about the Ravens. Maybe the Ravens do drop the ball here. Or even if the Ravens win and you need to potentially go to Baltimore, you've beaten the Ravens in the playoffs before. Lamar got hurt at the end of the game, but you've beaten the Ravens in the playoffs before. So there's some confidence there. I understand you're banged up. A couple other teams are. I understand that maybe your head coach isn't the best. Not all the best head coaches win Super Bowls. Mike McCarthy's won a Super Bowl. Come on now. At the end of the day, you look at the state of the AFC this season. You know the Chiefs are going to try to improve next season. The Jets are going to get a quarterback next season. The Chargers should be better next year, in theory. The Bengals should be healthy next year. If not now, then when? If you're Buffalo. And this is not just this current core of guys and the fact that they've lost to Mahomes in the playoff twice and Burrow last year. Again, we've said this the entire year. This is a city with demons. They need this team to at least exercise one of them. If not now, then when? By a hair, I'm picking the Bills. And if they don't get it done, it's not going to be a good 2024, to say the very least, for Buffalo. weather aside.
To answer your question, if not now, then when? When the Buffalo Bandits go for their second straight National Lacrosse League championship, because they won in 2023. So Buffalo's already run out of good favor. And here's my thing. Like, as much as I would love to see Buffalo try and host a third straight playoff game with snowfall and everyone screaming, this is why you build the dome. It's supposed to be 32 degrees next week. So they won't have to worry about that if they host it. But I don't think they do. I don't know whether it's just playoff magic, whether Mahomes can finally show he can win a game on the road, whether Sean Hockley is going to call a bad call that favors the Chiefs. Because, again, they kind of have to have a makeup call for the offensive offsides against Kadarius Toney at some point, right?
You don't need a makeup call. That was the right call to make.
But you do, because this is Roger Goodell and the Swiftie Nation. Karma is the guy on the Chiefs.
If this game is decided by, I'm saying this right now. If this game gets decided by a makeup call, just fire every single official you have, because that is an absolute joke.
It's the worst thing that would happen to the NFL.
They're all part-time anyways.
Referees have been under such scrutiny.
They have been.
It comes down to a controversial call.
Give me Kansas City, because you know what? Buffalo last year could have been there, if not now, then when. And how did they come out in the divisional round against the Bengals? Flat and awful.
Well, Joe Burrow is Joe Burrow. Joe Cool is Joe Cool.
And what's Patrick Mahomes?
Money boy Mahomes.
Exactly. Give me Kansas City. I'll go with the two lower seeds in the AFC.
Justin, what do you got?
I'm going to go with who I'm going to root for, and that's definitely not Buffalo.
Okay.
So, as a Jets fan, honestly, I really don't know who's going to win this game. I'm very torn. I think that my head is leaning more towards Buffalo. My gut is leaning more towards Buffalo, but I'll never bet against Mahomes ever.
Okay.
Even if this is the worst team he's been on, I gotta ride with the guys that have been there before. So I'm gonna go with the Chiefs.
All right, Niners Packers. Give me the 49ers. I'll keep it simple.
Green Bay covers, but the Niners win.
I take the Niners too.
Do they cover? Do the Packers cover?
Yeah. I said I expect the Packers to cover.
Okay. All right. So
like a 9.8 win.
There's your sports agents of chaos betting advice for the episode. Lions Buccaneers. It's actually not legal in Connecticut, by the way.
Oh wow.
Yeah, funny, hilarious.
All right. So,
Buccaneers Lions. Rick, you know what? You throw this first because I know I think your pick is the most interesting here.
Yeah, it is, because I've been ranting about the fact that I do not feel confident in this at all. However, if I'm sticking with the team that I had winning the NFC in the preseason, then I got to throw my hand behind the Lions again. But I can see the Bucs pulling this game out. That's what scares me, because the Lions have all this goodwill, but again, they in that second half they did not look very good. Like, they stopped the Rams on 2 possessions on defense to get field goals, but overall totality, the Lions defense was not very good. So they'll win, but I'm not confident in it at all. I'm really not. If Tampa wins, I wouldn't be surprised.
I'm going to go with the Lions too. I think that they're the more complete team. I think that the best players on the Bucs, the best, they have like better receiving core, and maybe a better defensive line. It's close, but I think totally, it's the Lions are the better team. They've been the better team all year, and the Bucs have been spotty and streaky. I would not be surprised if it's one of those games where they just don't show up, unfortunately.
Sometimes it do be like that, and it do be what it do be, boys. So my pick to go to San Francisco. Yeah, I did that on purpose to you, Rick, just to confuse you. Probably Justin too, actually. My pick.
I don't think it feel like it is, but it do.
Exactly. I just did it more roundabout. Anyways, my pick to win this game and head to San Francisco to face the 49ers in the NFC Championship game. For the first time for this team in many years, the Detroit Lions are going to the NFC title game Do it for the city. Do it for the town. Do it for Eminem so we could get more Marshall Mathers intros for the Detroit Lions playoff games because that was actually pretty entertaining. Give me the Lions to win this one. So Lions, 49ers, and Ravens, Bills for me for my championship game matchups. Ravens, Chiefs, and 49ers, Lions for Justin. I got that. And then 49ers, Lions for Rick as well, begrudgingly, because he sticks by his picks. And a double lower seeded matchup, the 3 versus the 4, Chiefs versus Texans in the AFC title game. Will we be right? Will we be wrong? Maybe all of us get all our picks wrong. Who knows? Maybe that's somehow a reality. I don't think it is, but maybe. No, I know it's not a reality. That's part of the joke. All right, you two have ruined all my jokes this episode. Thank you for joining us on this week's edition of the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast. This completes another week of NFL playoff talk. 2 more weeks of NFL playoff remain for us to lead into the conference championship games next week and the Super Bowl a couple weeks after that. It's going to be the end of the 2023-2024 campaign, but then the fun of the offseason will commence, and we will thank you all so much for joining us for that, like you do join us for the pod on a weekly basis. From your friends that love to have fun, football, and chaos to all of you, enjoy another weekend of football, and we'll see you guys next time.